Chapter 1375. No one knew when it happened. Yi Xian was dressed in black, and 3,000 strands of black hair hung behind his head. He followed the snow that filled the sky, and the howling wind caused his clothes to explode. Although he didn't have the slightest aura around him, he stood in the air as if he was the ruler of the world. Looking at the scene in front of them, the uncle and nephew were shocked. The middle-aged man came back to his senses and shouted at Yi Xian, "Run! This giant ice-sea beast is about to become a supreme saint. You are no match for it." Yi Xian's face was calm. He was so calm that there were no ripples. He stared at the giant ice-sea beast in the void. Just his gaze alone made the giant ice-sea beast not dare to move. Scram! Yi Xian spoke in an indifferent and calm voice. He spat out a short and calm word without the slightest bit of power. What happened next shocked the uncle and nephew. The giant ice-sea beast that caused the two of them to feel fear and despair actually trembled. Then, it turned around and abruptly sank into the ice sea. The enormous ice river water stirred up endless waves. This terrifying fierce beast was actually scared away by Yi Xian's words and fled in panic. The uncle and nephew were completely turned into puppets. They felt like they were dreaming. A giant ice-sea beast that was about to face the tribulation of a supreme saint was scared off by a person. What cultivation level was this black-robed man in front of them? Sage King? Creation? Yin-yang? Or was it a path-seeking almighty who had transcended the mortal world? The ferocious name of the giant ice-sea beast was well known to the world. Even a supreme saint would not want to provoke such a ferocious beast. After all, a beast's body was much stronger than a human's. However, the person in front of them could make the beast turn around and flee. This showed that the person in front of them had an unimaginable cultivation level. "Senior, thank you for saving our lives." The middle-aged man quickly came to his senses. He hurriedly knelt on the broken ice and kowtowed to Yi Xian. "Actually, your life and death have nothing to do with me. Since I have saved your lives, you will have to be my servants for the time being." Yi Xian had never been a benevolent person, and he wasn't so bored as to save two unrelated people. The only reason he had returned was because he was alone, and there were some trivial matters that needed someone to deal with. He also needed to familiarize himself with the North Star sector as soon as possible, and this uncle and nephew pair could be his guides. "Servant." The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly. He had long felt that Yi Xian was not a kind person. At this moment, he actually wanted to take the two of them as servants. This simply made his heart tremble. It had to be known that servants were worse than dogs in the Northern Star domain. Their masters could kill them at will. Some female servants were even swapped. The tragedy of it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. "I'm willing to be Senior's servant. I only beg Senior to save my mother's life." Without waiting for the middle-aged man's response, the youth knelt on the ground with a thud and kowtowed to Yi Xian repeatedly. His eyes were faintly red. "Yin, are you?" The middle-aged man whispered in a trembling voice. He hadn't expected the youth to be so muddle-headed. Could it be that he couldn't see that this black-robed man before him was not a good person? "You have a great hatred in your heart, and a demonic heart has been born." Not bad, not bad. What kind of person was Yi Xian? He had created his own buried heaven technique, learned a great taboo technique, and comprehended many supreme techniques. His vision was no less than that of a supreme expert. He could see at a glance that the youth had a demonic heart. Although he looked simple and pure, the demonic nature in his eyes was deeply rooted. If he could lead him onto the demonic path, he would definitely become a sharp blade in his hand in the future. Of course, no matter how good this youth's aptitude was, or how strong his demonic nature was, Yi Xian did not care. His true goal was to make a hidden move, one that could kill a supreme expert. Yi Xian was a vengeful person. Even if he was no match for a supreme expert now, that did not stop him from making plans for the future. He wanted to raise a demonic son that could shake the heavens and shake the earth. A demonic son that could topple a supreme expert. And this youth in front of him was a suitable candidate. The mystical demonic body. Yi Xian had not observed the youth's constitution too much earlier, but when he saw the demonic nature in the youth's eyes, he could tell that the youth had the extremely rare mystical demonic body. Although the mystical demonic body was not one of the 12 supreme battle constitutions, nor was it a legendary variant battle constitution, the mystical demonic body could still be ranked among the top of the many battle constitutions. Of course, what Yi Xian valued was not the youth's battle constitution, but the demonic nature in the youth's eyes. As long as he could draw out this demonic nature, this youth would become his most important chess piece in the future. Aptitude could be improved, and so could one's constitution. Only one's temperament was the most important. Yi Xian himself had a mortal body, but he had still made it this far. Even though supreme seeds were far inferior to him, the youth in front of him had a demonic heart, and was very suitable for becoming a demonic person. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens in the unseen world, for this youth to appear in front of him. Thinking of what he had planned, a cruel and cold smile appeared at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He seemed to have seen an extremely exciting scene that would give these supreme experts a huge surprise. However, it was still too early. The youth in front of him was too innocent. Although he had a demonic heart, he had not yet drawn it out. He needed to guide him step by step to achieve what Yi Xian wanted. "What's your name?" Yi Xian strolled in front of the youth. His voice was like the voice of a demon, causing the youth's eyes to tremble slightly. Then he hurriedly bowed and answered, "My name is Xiaoyan." "Xiaoyan?" Yi Xian nodded and said, "Good name, but I don't really like this name. I will bestow upon you my surname. From now on, you will be called Yi Xian Demon. I think this name suits you, and you will shine brightly in the future. As long as Senior can save my mother, I will be called Yi Xian Demon from now on. I will be your slave for the rest of my life." The youth did not hesitate, because he knew that the weak had no conditions to negotiate. He knelt at Yi Xian's feet and kowtowed 3 times. "I really like your intelligence and filial piety. Looking at you is like looking at me from back then." Yi Xian's eyes were in a trance as he vaguely remembered the past of his youth. Unfortunately, things had changed, and he was no longer as simple as before. "Xiaoyan, you dare to betray your ancestors?" Although the middle-aged man was afraid of Yi Xian, the youth had actually changed his name. This was simply unacceptable to him. How could he face the youth's dead father? Moreover, if the Xiao clan knew about this, they would definitely make things difficult for the youth. They wanted nothing more than to kill the youth. Wouldn't this give them an excuse? "Uncle, it's not that I want to change my name, but in this cruel northern star field, if I want to become stronger, I have to follow a strong person. Moreover, he can save my mother's life." The youth's eyes were red. Yi Xian wasn't moved in the slightest as he looked at the sorrowful expressions of the uncle and nephew. He only indifferently glanced at the middle-aged man, as a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. To Yi Xian, raising a demon son was both simple and difficult. However, he already had an idea in his mind. At this moment, the youth still did not know that he had fallen into Yi Xian's control. Although Yi Xian could eliminate all difficulties for him, the moment he met Yi Xian, the trajectory of his life would be completely changed. He did not know whether this was good or bad for him. Chapter 1376. Alas! The middle-aged man sighed. He knew he couldn't change anything, since the young man had already made his decision, and the black-clothed man in front of him was an expert. Perhaps this could be considered a rare opportunity for the young man. "Senior, may I know your name? How should I address you?" The young man bowed to Yi Xian and asked. "My name is Yi Xian. You can call me Mr." Yi Xian said. Yi Xian didn't want to show his real name. After all, he wanted to cultivate to the immortal realm in the Beichen star field. His name was also troublesome. Naturally, he couldn't use his real name. "Mr. My mother is suffering from the cold blood disease. Her life is in danger. Please return home with me. After my mother's cold blood disease is cured, I am willing to follow you for the rest of my life," the young man said. "It's fine. I have the same intention." Yi Xian smiled and nodded. He looked very kind, but the coldness in his eyes still remained. "Mister, after walking out of the ice sea and cold river, we will reach the ice river city. That is my hometown," the young man said loudly. After all, Yi Xian was only a young man. He didn't have the worries of the middle-aged man. He only knew that Yi Xian's cultivation was strong, and that he could cure his mother's cold blood disease. As for other things, he didn't care so much. Looking at the young man's happy face, Yi Xian's thoughts drifted. The word mother seemed a little distant to him. The kind figure remained in his memory. The young man begged for his mother's illness. Yi Xian's heart softened slightly. If he could restart his life, he wanted to go back to his childhood. He wanted to be with his mother, be filial to her, and never care about the disputes of the mortal world. Unfortunately, he couldn't go back. He was no longer an ignorant and innocent young man. After endless time, he had carried too many things on his back. He was stained with hundreds of millions of deaths. The sea of blood and the sky, the two banks of bones. However, Yi Xian didn't regret it. If he could choose again, he would still embark on this path of cultivation. Looking at Yi Xian's silence, the young man asked carefully, "Mister, can we go now?" Returning from his thoughts, Yi Xian's eyes drifted. He looked at the vast land of ice and murmured, "Let's go. I hope there won't be any problems ahead." Boom! Yi Xian took a step and disappeared with the uncle and nephew. Instantly, Yi Xian, even so, the middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. He wrapped himself and the young man up to block the howling cold wind. The uncle and nephew were shivering, and their lips had already turned the color of snow. In the blink of an eye, the three of them left the land of ice and entered the northern star domain. At this time, the sky was already dark, and the moon was high in the sky. Heavy snow continued to fall from the sky, causing the ground to be wrapped in silver. Under the illumination of the moon, the scene of a world of ice and snow was revealed. It was extremely beautiful, causing Yi Xian to praise it endlessly in his heart. Such a world of snow could only be seen in the northern star domain. However, because the northern star domain was bitterly cold all year round and lacked cultivation resources, the entire northern star domain was filled with slaughter. Haha! Suddenly the young man shivered. His small face turned red from the cold, and his lips were stained with ice. It was obvious that his cultivation wasn't good enough, and he had been invaded by the cold air. On the other hand, although the middle-aged man wasn't as bad as the young man, his aura was abnormally dim. He seemed to be lacking in strength. In the face of this cold winter snow, his resistance was extremely weak. Mortals are really pitiful. Yi Xian sighed helplessly as he looked at the situation of the two of them. He'd forgotten that he'd already stepped into the Tao querying realm, so he only treated this cold winter as a peerless beauty. However, the cultivation of the uncle and nephew were too weak, so he treated this journey as a beautiful scenery, but he caused the uncle and nephew to suffer greatly. He was afraid that the cold air between the heavens and earth had already invaded the two of them. If this continued, the two of them would definitely turn into ice sculptures before they could reach Ice River City. "It's late. I think the two of you must be hungry. Let's rest for the night," Yi Xian said softly and was about to shoot down. "Say, Senior, below is the territory of the ferocious beasts. It's not too late for us to rest after we leave this place." Although the middle-aged man's cultivation wasn't high, he was quite knowledgeable. Below them was a place where the ferocious beasts gathered. If they rested here and the ferocious beasts attacked, they would be buried in the mouths of the ferocious beasts. "It's fine." Yi Xian could naturally sense the auras of the many ferocious beasts in the ice forest below. There were even Saint King-level ferocious beasts in the depths of the ice forest. However, to Yi Xian this was nothing. He didn't care about them at all. As they shot down from the sky and bathed in the snow, Yi Xian, and the other two, had already descended into the ice forest. "These are cedar trees, right?" Looking at the many ancient pine trees, the silver-white branches sparkling under the moonlight, Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh in admiration. This kind of beautiful scenery could only be found in the North Star field. It was impossible to see it in any other field. At this moment, the uncle and nephew were focused on rushing back home. However, Yi Xian didn't care. He was more focused on cultivating his body and mind. He was planning a series of things in his mind. How could the uncle and nephew be in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery in front of them? The young man was shivering from the cold, while the middle-aged man looked worried. He was constantly looking around, afraid that the ferocious beasts would appear and treat them as food. "Senior, I'll go cut some trees to add firewood." The middle-aged man bowed and walked to the side. Not long after, the firewood was lit, and a raging bonfire ignited in the ice forest, warming the place. The young man's flushed face gradually became rosy. "Shalala." Suddenly, in the depths of the ice forest, the sound of leaves rustling and the roars of ferocious beasts could be heard. The uncle and nephew's sleepy eyes became wide awake. They immediately unsheathed their steel swords, afraid that the ferocious beasts would attack and kill them here. "It just so happens that I haven't eaten yet. Here you are, delivering yourself to me." Yi Xian didn't care about the uncle and nephew's actions. He slowly got up and took a step forward, disappearing from the uncle and nephew's sight. As Yi Xian left, the roars of ferocious beasts could be heard from the depths of the ice forest, making the uncle and nephew's hearts palpitate. 10 minutes later, a loud rumbling sound was heard. Yi Xian grabbed a huge ice elephant by its tail and dragged it on the icy ground, slowly walking towards the two of them. Bang! The ice elephant fell to the ground, its huge body causing the earth to tremble. The uncle and nephew also exclaimed in surprise. This is a snow elephant, this is a Saint King level ferocious beast, right?" the young man exclaimed. The middle-aged man was even more shocked. He looked at Yi Xian with fear in his eyes. He had previously guessed that Yi Xian was a great cultivator above the Saint King level, but now it seemed that it wasn't so simple. The mysterious man in black in front of him must be at the Yin-Yang realm. Otherwise, how could he kill a snow elephant in such a short time? This person's identity was mysterious, and his cultivation couldn't be judged by common sense. This was a Saint King level ferocious beast. If he was only at the creation realm, how could he silently capture and kill such a ferocious beast? Chapter 1377. This ice forest is not too big. We killed a few beasts, but their meat is as tough as rotten wood. We happened to find this ice elephant. It should be delicious to have this beast for dinner. Yi Xian was not a person who cared about food. However, he had been asleep for thousands of years. Although his cultivation had reached the Dao querying realm, his blood and qi were still weak. Although this ice elephant was only at the Saint King level, it could still replenish some of the blood and qi in his body. In the battle that year, Yi Xian had used up all his resources. Although his cultivation was much stronger than before, his blood and qi were in urgent need of replenishment. Moreover, the meat of this ice elephant was tender and delicious. It was one of the best delicacies in the world. How could Yi Xian let go of the chance to see such an ingredient today? Hearing Yi Xian's words, the uncle and nephew unconsciously swallowed their saliva and looked at Yi Xian with fear. This person was simply a ferocious person. How could he kill a few beasts at will? If he did not kill them at will, was he going to slaughter all the beasts in the ice forest? Yi Xian was a young man after all. After recovering from his shock, he said excitedly, "This is an ice elephant. Even when my father was alive, I only remember tasting it once when I was young. It was secretly brought back by my father from a feast." Hearing the young man's words, the middle-aged man had a complicated look in his eyes. Ever since his elder brother passed away, this mother and child had been bullied by the tribe. He was also incompetent and did not take good care of them. "Sir, please take a seat. I will clean this up." The middle-aged man held a steel sword in his hand and quickly went to the ice elephant to clean it up. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, a huge elephant leg was being roasted over a bonfire. The aroma of meat wafted in the air, causing the young man's stomach to growl and his face to flush. As the elephant leg was roasted, the middle-aged man cut off a piece of the juiciest elephant meat and passed it to Yi Xian first. Yi Xian casually bit off a piece of elephant meat and swallowed it. Then he frowned slightly. Although the roasted elephant meat was tender and juicy, the blood and qi in it had evaporated. Yi Xian casually tossed the elephant meat in his hand to the youth. This caused the uncle and nephew to be stunned. Could it be that the elephant meat was difficult to swallow? However, in the next moment, Yi Xian slowly stood up and walked towards the ice snow elephant. What happened next completely shocked the uncle and nephew on the spot, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. Roar! Yi Xian opened his mouth and activated the Calamity Transcender technique. The giant ice elephant instantly turned into a pile of bones, and its flesh and blood turned into blood energy that was swallowed by him. Demonic arts. The middle-aged man was shocked and his heart trembled violently. Although he didn't know what kind of technique Yi Xian was using, such a terrifying technique was undoubtedly a demonic technique. This blood qi is really too weak. Yi Xian frowned as he looked at the skeleton of the Ice Sea gigantic elephant. With his Dao querying realm cultivation, the blood qi of this gigantic Ice Sea gigantic elephant was just a drop in the bucket. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Come. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes turned, and he quietly activated the heaven-burying technique. Countless gray rays of light spread throughout the ice forest, and strange demonic roars resounded between heaven and earth. Ta. In the next moment, an extremely shocking thing happened. Rumbling sounds could be heard from the vast ice forest. Pairs of ferocious eyes rose from all directions, accompanied by extremely terrifying roars of beasts. Roar! The roars of beasts shook the sky, and a large number of cedar trees collapsed. Hundreds of extremely terrifying beasts appeared, and instantly surrounded Yi Xian. Ah! The young man cried out in alarm as his face instantly turned deathly pale. Even the middle-aged man broke out in a cold sweat out of fear, because the several hundred fierce beasts that had suddenly appeared were all the size of small hills. The aura of each fierce beast was at least at the Saint King realm, and there was no lack of creation realm fierce beasts among them. Roar! Yi Xian opened his mouth wide, and a cloud of black mist rose around him. The hundreds of beasts roared in fear, and their flesh instantly melted, turning into pale white skeletons that fell to the ground. Rumble! The blood qi of hundreds of beasts gathered into a river of blood. The rumbling blood river rushed into Yi Xian's mouth, and was swallowed into Yi Xian's stomach. Phew! After 3 breaths, Yi Xian slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His originally thin and weak body was slightly stronger, and his handsome and harmless face was slightly rosy. Although there isn't much blood qi, it can be considered as making up for the lack. Yi Xian muttered. Although he was not very satisfied, his body had begun to regain its vitality, which was a happy thing. In these tens of millions of years, although Yi Xian's cultivation had risen by a level, his physical body was still stagnant from tens of millions of years ago. Yi Xian was a person who paid great attention to physical combat strength. Back then, when he bathed in the supreme blood of the extreme devil, he had already tempered his physical body, causing it to undergo a qualitative change. As long as he absorbed more blood energy to strengthen his physical body, his combat strength would be able to improve even further. Yi Xian's casual action frightened the uncle and nephew, especially the middle-aged man, who looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of fear. You are a great demon, a terrifying great demon. At this moment, the middle-aged man's heart was trembling. There were great demons in the northern star field, and anyone who could be called a great demon was an extremely vicious and terrifying character. This kind of person was extremely evil, and had no taboos. Even some great sects and orthodoxies were not willing to offend them. At this moment, the middle-aged man was very sure that Yi Xian was a terrifying great demon. He was already regretting his involvement with Yi Xian. However, the middle-aged man did not notice that besides fear, the youth's eyes were also red with excitement when he looked at Yi Xian. This kind of demonic light was extremely stagnant. Clearly, Yi Xian's actions had deeply touched his demonic heart. The night passed without a word. The ice forest fell into silence. Later on, the uncle and nephew also fell into a deep sleep. With a ferocious person like Yi Xian here, the ice forest was deathly silent. The hundreds of fierce beast skeletons added a frightening atmosphere to the atmosphere. As the sun rose, sunlight sprinkled down on the earth, adding a touch of vitality to this bitterly cold land. The uncle and nephew had already woken up. Looking at Yi Xian sitting cross-legged in the void, they did not dare to disturb him. Only when Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of turbid air did the night's cultivation come to an end. Let's go. With their auras connected, Yi Xian brought his uncle and nephew into the air and shot towards the direction of Ice River City. Glacier City was located at the border of the northern star field. It was an extremely famous holy land for cultivation. A river of ice slowly flowed around the city, with bits of ice floating in the water. This river of ice was the source of drinking water for the city. It was even revered as a holy river by the citizens of Glacier City. In such a harsh environment, obtaining water was a difficult problem. With such a source of water, Glacier City was built around it. Chapter 1378. It was a cold winter, and the northern wind was biting cold. On the road to Ice River City, 3 figures were slowly approaching. Looking at the outline of the city ahead, the youth's face was filled with excitement. He and his uncle had gone to the glaciers for half a year. It was a journey of 100,000 miles, and it was unknown how much hardship they had endured. However, it only took them a day to return. Although they had suffered the pain of the cold wind, the youth still enjoyed it. Not only had they found the extreme ice fox, but they had also brought back a mysterious expert. His mother could finally be saved. How could the youth not be excited? During this day's journey, Yi Xian also understood why his uncle and nephew had gone to the glaciers. The middle-aged man was the youth's uncle, Xiao Changhe. The youth's father was originally a cultivation genius of the Xiao family. Although he was not the patriarch, he was vaguely known as the #1 person in the Xiao family. What a pity! This great world was very cruel. Even a genius would die young, especially in the bitter cold of the northern region. As everyone knew, the northern region was bitterly cold, and cultivators relied on vicious beasts as their resources. The Xiao family was also a famous family in Ice River City, comparable to a medium-sized sect, and had a heritage of more than 100,000 years. Naturally, they would organize cultivators in the family to go to places where vicious beasts gathered and hunt. And then a regrettable thing happened. During a hunting trip, they encountered a giant ice sea beast, and all the family members were killed. Xiao Yun's father also died in that hunt, leaving behind a widow and an orphan in the Xiao family, struggling at death's door. When it rains, it pours. After hearing the news, Xiao Yun's mother was already weak and sickly. After several years of grief, her cold blood disease broke out, and her life was in danger. This made the youth even more distressed. With the help of his uncle, Xiao Changhe, he learned from the shamans in the family that there was an extreme ice fox in the glaciers. As long as he took its blood and had a small saint perform blood transfusion, his mother would naturally be cured. After hearing this news, the youth asked the elders in the family to help him. He hoped that they could send cultivators to the glaciers to hunt down the extreme ice fox and cure his mother's illness. However, the elders in the family were indifferent to the youth's request. The answer they gave him was also very simple. The distance between Ice River City and the land of glaciers was 100,000 miles. The journey was fraught with danger. How could they waste the clan's resources for a weak woman? In the harsh environment of the North Star domain, not only were the ferocious beasts a resource, but the cultivators of the sects and families were also the greatest resource. Although Xiao Yun's father was known as the #1 person in the Xiao family when he was alive, he had already passed away. This was how cruel the major clans were. Things that had no value to them were not worth wasting their resources on. Not only the Xiao clan was like this, the other major sects were the same. Yi Xian could also see the cruelty of the North Star domain from the young man's description. In this bitter cold land of the northern region, only the strong were respected, and only the fittest survived. All resources could only be given to the living. However, Yi Xian liked this kind of rule very much. But to the youth, it was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. He had no sense of belonging to his family. As the 3 of them approached the city gate, a stone bridge crossing the river came into view of Yi Xian. Looking at the city covered in silver, Yi Xian's eyes deepened. He wondered if his trip to the North Star domain would allow him to enter the immortal realm. "Look, the uncle and nephew are back!" Exclamations rang out from the city gate, causing the soldiers guarding the city to look at Yi Xian's group. They didn't die? Did they hunt the extreme ice fox? Some cultivators who had returned from hunting whispered. Yi Xian's eyes shone with a strange light as he looked at the cultivators in front of the city gate. Their burly figures and ferocious faces were filled with explosive muscles. These cultivators of the northern region were full of vigor and vitality. They did not have the ethereal feeling of ordinary cultivators. Instead, they had a fierce aura. Clearly, they were all ruthless people. "Mister, we have arrived at Ice River City. Please go ahead." After returning to his homeland, the youth did not forget about Yi Xian. He was even more respectful towards him. Hearing the youth's words, Yi Xian smiled faintly. He walked across the stone bridge and entered the city gate. The uncle and nephew followed closely behind. The three of them quickly entered the city. Many cultivators who had returned to Ice River City at the same time watched the three of them enter the city. All kinds of whispers rang out again. "Hey, did you see that? The thing on Xiao Yun's waist seems to be the extreme ice fox. I saw it long ago. This kid really has the demeanor of his father. The Ice Sea is 100,000 miles away from Ice River City. He must have suffered a lot along the way. Humph. Are you really ignorant, or are you pretending to be ignorant? Although the extreme ice fox is just an ordinary fierce beast, it is extremely cunning, and its speed is as fast as lightning. Even with Xiao Changhe by his side, how could it be so easy to catch it?" "That's right. This brother is right. Didn't you see that the black-clothed man was only wearing a thin robe? I saw that this person's chi and blood are vigorous. I'm afraid that he is a grand cultivator. Maybe he is a small saint." Someone said with certainty, guessing Yi Xian's identity. "This brother means, could it be that this black-clothed man helped Xiao Yun to hunt the extreme ice fox?" "Ha!" A mocking laugh rang out. A cultivator shook his head and sighed. "Even if this person is a small saint, so what? The blood of the extreme ice fox is extremely precious. If his father was still alive, he could naturally use it to cure this kid's mother's illness. However, this kid's father has already passed away. Xiao family is a big family. How could they let such a precious thing be used by a weak woman?" As this person's words rang out, everyone showed a helpless expression and nodded in agreement. The Northern Star Field was a bitter cold place. Cultivation resources were the most scarce. Xiao Yun was just a child and did not have the cultivation of his father. Such a precious resource naturally had to be used on a living person. This was also the cruel law of the Northern Star Field. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. This sentence fully explained the survival of the Northern Star Field. At this moment, Yi Xian and the other two had already entered the Ice River City. With the cultivation of the uncle and nephew, they naturally could not hear the discussion in front of the city gate. However, Yi Xian's cultivation was very high. Even if a mosquito landed on the ground, he could hear it, let alone the discussion of the crowd. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. Looking at the excited expression of the young man, a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This was just the beginning. Aristocratic families all had their own schemes. All kinds of shady dealings happened from time to time. Back in the human world, Yi Xian had experienced the cruelty of the Yi family when he was young. He had already predicted what would happen. However, wasn't this what Yi Xian was looking forward to? If he wanted to cultivate a devil's son, he had to let him understand the cruelty of this world. Only then could he draw out his devil heart and truly use it for his own use. Yi Xian had never pitied anyone, nor did he have any compassion. He only believed in himself. Only when he was strong could he truly be fearless of any tribulations. Looking at this young man, Yi Xian seemed to see himself in the past. He was also an abandoned child of his family, living lowly in the mortal world. The 6 desires are emotionless. Heaven and earth have no heart. Incarnate into a devil, the greatest of all time. Don't disappoint me, Yi Xian muttered softly. Chapter 1379. Mister, what did you say? Hearing Yi Xian's murmur, the youth was confused and asked. Nothing. Since you've agreed to save your mother, then don't delay any further. Let's go, Yi Xian said indifferently. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the youth nodded heavily and then quickly walked towards the Xiao family. His clan uncle, Xiao Changhe, slightly frowned. He didn't know why, but his mind was always tense. It was because ever since he met Yi Xian, he'd always felt uneasy, as if something extremely terrifying was about to happen. The three of them quickly rushed to the Xiao family, causing the people in the city to stop and watch. Looking at Yi Xian's thin clothes, everyone's eyes were filled with surprise and awe. This was their reverence for the strong. It had to be known that the bitter cold of the Northern Star domain wasn't just ordinary cold. It was a cold current that appeared between heaven and earth. This kind of cold current penetrated deep into the bones. If a mortal didn't cultivate some powerful blood qi techniques, it would be very difficult for them to survive in the northern region. And Yi Xian's thin clothes also proved that his cultivation was very strong. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the people on both sides of the street gradually thinned out. Yi Xian also saw the endless white jade pavilions. 2 Paixio sat on either side of a 10-meter-tall black jade door. There were also 2 bright-eyed cultivators guarding both sides of the door. 2 large words were written on a white gold plaque on a black background, Xiao family. Mister, this is the Xiao family. My mother is in the side courtyard. The youth spoke in a low voice. He was biting his lips so hard that a trace of blood flowed out. The words Xiao family and side courtyard were heavily emphasized by him. It was obvious that there was some secret behind it. Xiao Yun, don't show such emotions when you enter the Xiao family. If someone with ulterior motives tells the elders, both you and I will be punished, Xiao Changhe warned solemnly. Yes, uncle. Knowing that his emotions were fluctuating, the youth bowed and accepted the order, suppressing his resentment towards his family. His name is not Xiao Yun. His name is Yi Xuanma. I can forgive you this time, but don't do it again. Yi Xian glanced at Xiao Changhe indifferently. This also made Xiao Changhe's heart tremble. He could only nod stiffly. Although Yi Xian didn't release any aura, just a glance from him made Xiao Changhe's soul tremble. Let's go. Take me to see your mother and fulfill your last wish, Yi Xian said calmly and walked towards the door. However, Yi Xian's actions shocked the uncle and nephew duo. They had forgotten something important and hadn't told Yi Xian about it. This was the main entrance of the Xiao mansion. Only honored guests or clan elders could enter through it. Everyone else had to enter through the side entrance. The two of them were preoccupied with Mother Zhao's matter, and actually forgot to inform Yi Xian of this matter. Say, sir, the main entrance is for honored guests. We need to enter through the side entrance, the youth said shamefully. He didn't dare to look Yi Xian in the eye. Hearing the youth's words, Yi Xian's expression froze. Then he said calmly, if I'm not an honored guest, then who in this world is? It wasn't that Yi Xian was arrogant, but that he indeed had the right to be. What was a small Xiao mansion in his eyes? Not to mention that he had just entered the path-seeking realm. Just the fact that he had killed the Lord of the Extreme Demon was already known to the entire primal chaos. He could destroy such a large clan with a flick of his finger. If Yi Xian still entered through the side entrance, wouldn't it be a joke if the world found out about this? Although Yi Xian didn't care about the Xiao family, his real target was the youth. Otherwise, why would he be willing to set foot here? Yi Xian strolled towards the main entrance of the Xiao mansion. A trace of playfulness flashed across his eyes. An interesting show was about to begin. The three's actions had already attracted the attention of the cultivators guarding the gate. When they saw the uncle and nephew return, the two guards were already surprised. Now Yi Xian, a stranger, was actually going to enter through the main entrance. Was this person crazy? After all, this was the Xiao mansion of the Ice River City. Not just anyone could act so presumptuously here. Stop! The two guards shouted in unison. They unsheathed their long swords. At first glance, they looked very imposing. My two cousins, please wait. They had just returned to the Xiao family. The uncle and nephew didn't expect this to happen. Along the way, Yi Xian had become more and more unfathomable in their eyes. Even so, the uncle and nephew didn't think that Yi Xian could fight against the Xiao family. No one knew the terror of the Xiao family better than the uncle and nephew. Cousins. Xiao Yin, you're just a mere mortal. What qualifications do you have to call us cousins? One of the guards said disdainfully. The gaze he used to look at the youth was filled with contempt. A trace of humiliation flashed in the youth's eyes. At the side, Xiao Changhe's expression was even gloomier. Although his cultivation was much higher than the two guards, they were guarding the entrance of the Xiao family. They represented the face of the Xiao family. They weren't people he could offend. If I were the two of you, I would quickly inform the patriarch that an honored guest has arrived, Yi Xian said indifferently. Mr. Yu, looking at Yi Xian's fearless expression, the youth Xiao Yun's expression became anxious. Inform the patriarch? An honored guest has arrived? Haha. The two guards looked at each other and laughed wildly. They looked at Yi Xian, as if they were looking at an idiot. Chi. Suddenly, the two guards brandished their long blades and slashed towards Yi Xian. Their expressions were ferocious as they said, Kid, remember in your next life that there are some places where you can't be so presumptuous. They didn't say much. The two guards weren't weak, and were the face of the Xiao family. They would definitely kill anyone who dared to be presumptuous in the Xiao family, as a warning to others. Wait a moment. Such a scene caused the uncle and nephew to cry out in alarm. Their eyes were filled with fear. The two of them weren't afraid that Yi Xian would die under their blades, but they were afraid that the two guards would die at the hands of Yi Xian. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the two guards, the uncle and nephew were pleading for them to show mercy. This caused the two guards to smile cruelly, and the steel blades that were slashing towards Yi Xian became even more ferocious. Kid, remember, you must be merciless when facing your enemies. Only then can you slaughter your way to a place that belongs to you. Yi Xian turned around to look at the youth. He didn't make any movements, but his eyes slightly rotated, causing the surrounding space to instantly distort. Bang! Bang! The void exploded as flesh and blood flew everywhere. The two long blades turned into bubbles, and the two guards strangely exploded into two masses of flesh and blood, staining the ground with scarlet blood. Let's go! Yi Xian seemed to have done something very casual. He strolled into the Xiao residence, not even glancing at the two pieces of flesh and blood on the ground. Hiss! Killing without a word. The uncle and nephew sucked in a breath of cold air, their bodies and minds trembling. The uncle and nephew looked at each other with worry in their eyes. However, they had already come to this point, and it was too late to redeem themselves. They could only follow Yi Xian into the Xiao residence. In the Xiao residence, Yi Xian walked forward with his hands behind his back, admiring the scenery in the Xiao residence. The uncle and nephew looked worried as they led the way in front without saying a word. Yun, Demon Yun, when the senior is done treating your mother, you can go with him and never come back. Xiao Cheng has secretly transmitted his voice to the youth with an extremely serious expression. Chapter 1380. Yes. The youth nodded heavily. Leading an outsider into the Xiao residence and killing two guards was a crime that would definitely be severely punished in the Xiao residence. His aptitude was mediocre and was not valued by the Xiao clan. It was fine if he was killed by the Xiao clan, but he could not implicate this Mr. and fall here. In the youth's heart, the Xiao clan was an insurmountable colossus. His heart was filled with reverence for the Xiao clan. Even if Yi Xian displayed a powerful killing method, the youth still believed that Yi Xian could not resist the Xiao clan. Worried about this matter, the youth quickened his pace and constantly passed through the Xiao residence. Along the way, the three of them naturally encountered many people from the Xiao residence. Seeing the return of the uncle and nephew, the many servants and maids in the residence revealed astonishment in their eyes. Some even quickly rushed to the main residence to report this matter. Feeling the gazes of the crowd, the uncle and nephew's figures sped up even more, and the worry on their faces became more and more serious. The two of them did not say a word as they brought Yi Xian to the Xiao residence's side courtyard. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the three of them were already in the Xiao residence's side courtyard. Looking at the so-called Xiao residence's side courtyard, a profound look flashed across Yi Xian's eyes. He finally understood why the youth's emotions fluctuated so violently when he mentioned the Xiao residence's side courtyard. The so-called side courtyard was actually a place where livestock were kept. The smell of livestock feces constantly emitted from the side courtyard, making people want to vomit. Mother, Yunner is back. Without waiting for the side courtyard's door to open, the youth shouted loudly and quickly ran towards the side courtyard's door. Creak. The slightly broken door was pushed open by the youth, and the scene in the courtyard was reflected in Yi Xian's eyes. A large number of pigs, cows, and other livestock were kept in enclosures. The dense smell of feces assaulted Yi Xian's face, causing Yi Xian to frown slightly. "Mother," the youth's anxious voice continuously sounded, but there was no response from the side courtyard. This caused the uncle and nephew to reveal uneasy expressions. Creak. A door was quickly pushed open by the youth. In the messy room, there was no one on the bed. The table and chairs on the ground were already broken, and there were even some miscellaneous items scattered on the ground, as if there had been a smashing here. "Mother, where's Mother?" Looking at the scene in the house, the young man clenched his fists. His eyes were filled with madness, and the red light in his eyes began to flicker. "Is Xiaoyan back?" All of a sudden, a weak voice sounded out, causing Yi Xian to look towards the source of the voice. Outside the door, there was a young man dressed as a servant. His face was yellow and his body was thin and weak. He looked at the three people in the courtyard, and his voice sounded a little timid. When the youth heard this voice, it was as if he had grasped at a life-saving straw. He quickly came to the manservant's side and asked anxiously, "Why isn't my mother here? Do you know where she went?" Xiaoyan, Auntie she." The manservant hesitated as hesitation flashed through his eyes. An extremely uneasy feeling rose from the bottom of Xiaoyan's heart. He suddenly grabbed the manservant's shoulders and shook him. "What happened to my mother? Hurry up and tell me." "Bo, Auntie was sent to the returning heaven's court by the second prince yesterday. I'm afraid. Hearing the manservant's words, the young man felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was completely stunned. "Xiaoyuanda, I'm going to kill you." The young man roared angrily. The aura around him was extremely chaotic. A terrifying red light flashed through his eyes. "Where is the returning heaven's court?" Yi Xian slowly walked over with a playful smile. The manservant did not dare to delay, and quickly explained the situation of the returning heaven's court. Returning heaven's court. As the name implied, anyone who entered this place did not belong to the mortal world. They would be fed a kind of poisonous grass, and would fall into a deep sleep, never to wake up. This sounded nice, but it was actually a kind of euthanasia. This was an institution that every family had to set up. Killing the useless could save the family's resources. Hearing the manservant's words, Yi Xian looked deeply at the youth and said, "Your mother was just sent to the returning heaven's court yesterday. Is there still a chance to save her?" The youth instantly woke up. He suddenly regained his senses and said in an extremely urgent voice, "The returning heaven's court only gives out the poisonous grass every 3 days. How many days has it been since the last time the poisonous grass was given out?" The youth suddenly looked at the manservant and asked anxiously, "Today just happens to be the 3rd day. I'm afraid Auntie she." The manservant stuttered, "I want to save my mother." Without waiting for the manservant to finish speaking, the youth suddenly charged out of the door and rushed in the direction of the returning heaven's court. At this moment, Xiao Changhe was extremely cold. His body trembled uncontrollably as extreme guilt appeared in his eyes. When his elder brother was still alive, how could the mother and son live in a side courtyard? They even had servants serving them. He never thought that after his elder brother's death, the mother and son would be chased to a side courtyard to live with these animals, while his elder brother's wife would be sent to the returning heaven's court. This caused Xiao Changhe to clench his fists tightly. His nails dug into his palms and blood flowed out without him noticing. "Senior, this junior will never be able to repay the great kindness you have shown to my uncle and nephew. Leave from the side door. Walk another 3 li, and you will reach the back door of the Xiao residence. Please leave as soon as possible." Xiao Changhe cried out sorrowfully. A mournful expression appeared around him, as he turned into a gust of wind, and rushed towards the returning heaven's court. Watching the uncle and nephew leave, Yi Xian's face was expressionless. He looked at the flying snow and the corners of his mouth curled into a merciless smile. There were many tragic things in this world. If he did not appear, this youth would be miserable. Today would probably be the day of his death. The void trembled and ripples spread. Yi Xian took a step forward, and instantly disappeared from the side courtyard, leaving the manservant in a daze. His eyes were filled with confusion. Returning heaven's court. The middle-aged manager had his hands behind his back. Two servants held two trays in the palms of their hands. Dozens of jade bottles appeared on top of the trays. In front of the manager were dozens of old, weak women, children, and people with broken limbs. At this moment, they were all kneeling on the ground. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were filled with the color of death. It was as if they had become the living dead. You are a member of the Xiao family in life, and a ghost of the Xiao family in death. The returning heaven's herb is a blessing given to you by the family. Why aren't you thanking us? The middle-aged manager said indifferently. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at the dozens of old, weak women and children. Thank you for the family's blessing. The voices of the dozens of people were like mosquitoes and flies. Facing the arrival of death, not only did they not cry out in fear, they instead felt a kind of relief. In this cruel world, living had become torture. Perhaps death was a kind of relief for them. I still haven't seen my yin. I definitely won't die. Suddenly, in the crowd, a woman in green muttered. Although she was wearing a rough hemp garment and her face was pale, her exquisite face was a rare beauty. Her temperament was dignified and graceful, unlike the people beside her who were all emitting a deathly aura. Chapter 1381. Hearing the young woman's words, the middle-aged steward's eyes flashed with regret. It was such a pity that such a beautiful woman was going to be killed by the family. If he could pamper this woman, his 30 years as a steward would not be in vain. After all, this woman was once the wife of the first genius of the Xiao family. What a pity. This woman was definitely not someone he could touch. Lingxue, you suffer from cold blood disease and live in pain all year round. How dare you say such nonsense after being blessed by the family? The middle-aged steward frowned and reprimanded her. Although he could not disrespect the high and mighty young mistress of the Xiao family, reprimanding her made the middle-aged steward's vanity soar. My death is not to be regretted, but before I die, I just want to see my yin. The green-robed woman bit her lips tightly, giving off a pitiful feeling. This was also her greatest wish before she died. Humph! The uncle and nephew are full of themselves. They went to the ice sea to hunt for the extreme ice fox. I'm afraid they have already died on the way. Don't be delusional. Go to heaven today. No, my son will never die. Lingxue choked with sobs and rebuked loudly. Stubborn. Send them to heaven. Lingxue's beauty did not arouse the slightest pity for those who were about to die. The two servants were emotionless. They walked to the crowd with trays in their hands and handed out jade bottles to the old, weak women and children. At this moment, no one was really unafraid of death. Facing death head-on, the dozens of people who were about to die finally had a trace of fear in their eyes. But even so, they knew that their time was up. Haha. My husband worked hard for the family all his life and was eventually devoured by a ferocious beast. But the family is heartless and sends us to heaven. Such a family makes me feel bitter and hateful. An old woman laughed wildly. She laughed and laughed until tears flowed out of her eyes. Then, she suddenly pulled out the cork and drank the liquid in the bottle. Bang! His body fell to the ground powerlessly and slowly stiffened. However, his eyes, which were filled with unwillingness before his death, refused to close. The middle-aged steward seemed to be used to such a scene and did not care. He looked indifferently at the dozens of people who were about to die and spoke slowly. Don't hesitate. Save the family's resources and be free. This is a great kindness. Crack! The ear-piercing sound of a jade bottle shattering rang out. The middle-aged steward's face darkened as he looked at Lingxue. Lingxue, I'll call you young madam again. I hope you won't make a mistake. Don't force me to do anything to you. You'd better go back now and leave the last dignity of the young madam of the Xiao family. Men, give young mistress another bottle of heaven-returning elixir. The middle-aged steward said gloomily, as he looked at the broken jade bottle in front of Lingxue. The jade bottle was placed in Lingxue's hand again, which made her bite her lips hard. Her eyes were filled with despair. She wasn't afraid of death, but she wasn't willing to die without seeing her son. But today, she knew that her lifespan had come to an end. She would rather die than allow the steward to force himself on her and defile her body. Yin, Ling Xue murmured with a mournful look. Without any hesitation, she unplugged the cork and drank the liquid in the bottle. Mother! All of a sudden, a heart-wrenching shriek was heard again. The young man dashed toward Ling Xue, ignoring the middle-aged steward's shocked expression. Crack! The jade bottle shattered. Looking at the young man in front of her, Ling Xue's face was filled with serenity. She didn't expect that she would be able to see her son again at the last moment of her life. Now, she could sleep peacefully without any worries. It's good that you're back. Mother. Mother is relieved. Ling Xue smiled with relief as her hands were held tightly by the young man. Her eyelids were slightly heavy, as if she was about to fall into a deep sleep. Sister-in-law, Xiao Changhe came with the wind. His mournful aura was blooming as he looked at the middle-aged steward with extreme hatred. Mother, don't die. The young man held Ling Xue's hands that were gradually turning cold and cried out. Buzz! Time and space were reversed. Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the young man. Looking at the woman's pale face, a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian's appearance woke the young man up instantly. He knew that Yi Xian must be someone as powerful as the Tongtian. Perhaps only Yi Xian could save his mother's life. Sir, you're like the Tongtian. Please save my mother. Looking at the young man's forehead that was stained with blood, Yi Xian frowned slightly. His eyes were slightly dazed. The young man's filial piety was the same as his in the past. It was a pity that the young man could only follow in his footsteps. Yi Xian put two fingers together. A bit of the power of time and space was born at his fingertips. He pointed directly at Ling Xue's forehead. This was the divine finger of time and space. With Yi Xian's cultivation at the Dao querying realm, he could freeze time and space. Ling Xue's face suddenly flushed red, and then turned pale again. Her consciousness that was about to dissipate gradually recovered. She also gradually saw Yi Xian's face clearly. I've already frozen her bloodline. The poison is temporarily under control. Once we find a quiet place, I'll naturally expel the poison from her body, Yi Xian said softly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the young man kept kowtowing and thanking him. He wiped away the tears on his cheeks. Mother, Sir's cultivation is like the Tongtian. Not only did you help Yin catch the extreme Yin ice fox, but you'll also cure Mother's cold and blood disease. Mother, when you recover, will leave the Xiao family and never come back. Haha. All of a sudden, there was a sinister laugh. The middle-aged steward walked forward and said with a ferocious expression, Little bastard, I didn't expect you to not die. You even brought back the extreme ice fox? Looking at the ferocious beast on the young man's waist, the middle-aged steward's eyes flashed with greed. This kind of spiritual creature was hard to find. He didn't expect the young man to really hunt it down and return to the Xiao family to saving Ling Xue. Destroying the returning to heaven ceremony is a serious crime. Hand over the extreme ice fox and go to the Hall of Penal Law to plead guilty, the middle-aged steward said coldly, showing his authority. This ice fox is my mother's life-saving medicine. How can I give it to you? Hearing the middle-aged steward's words, the young man roared with hatred in his eyes. Take your mother and senior first. I'll stop him. Xiao Changhe took a step forward, and a violent aura surged around him. He was ready to fight to the death. With just you, the middle-aged steward sneered. Xiao Changhe, if you don't want to die, you'd better get out of my way. Boring. Without waiting for Xiao Changhe to make a move, Yi Xian's eyes rotated, and a scene that made everyone panic appeared. Flesh and blood turned into bones, and bones turned into ashes. The time in this space seemed to be reversed. The middle-aged steward completely turned into nothingness and never appeared in this world again. Let's go. Indifferent and silent, Yi Xian walked out of the returning to heaven courtyard, as if he was taking a stroll in the park. No one clearly saw how the middle-aged manager died, but everyone knew that it was definitely Yi Xian's doing. However, to silently turn a person into dust, this simply caused one's body and mind to tremble to the extreme. Ling Xue's eyes flashed with shock as she looked at Yi Xian's departing figure. The uncle and nephew were completely dumbstruck, and the rest of the old weak, women and children, as well as the two servants, were even trembling. Mother, let's go. With Sir here, No one can hurt us. The young man helped Lingxue up. The mother and son quickly followed Yi Xian's footsteps and returned to the side courtyard. As Yi Xian and the others left, the servants on both sides screamed and fled. The whole Xiao family was in complete chaos. In the side courtyard, Yi Xian's eyes turned, and many domestic animals turned into ashes and dissipated between heaven and earth. With a wave of his hand, a violent cold wind blew, and the smell of feces in the entire side courtyard dissipated. At this moment, Lingxue looked at Yi Xian's back with an inexplicable look in her eyes. When her beautiful eyes flickered, it was as if she had made some kind of decision. Sir, can you really fight against the Xiao family? After rescuing his mother, the young man's depression dissipated. He asked Yi Xian tentatively, "Fight?" Yi Xian smiled. However, he didn't answer this question, because this question was too much of a joke in his opinion. "Yin'er, don't be rude to Sir." Lingxue pretended to reprimand and walked toward Yi Xian. Then she bowed and said, "Thank you for your help, Sir. Lingxue pays her respects to you." This woman was so scheming. With just a glance, Yi Xian could see two words in her eyes. Ambition. Very greedy ambition. This woman's performance was graceful and elegant. Her appearance was also peerless, and her figure was curvaceous. She was like a ripe peach that made people want to pick her. However, this woman's every move and action revealed her feminine charm. To put it bluntly, this woman was seducing him. Yes, she was seducing him. Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was very strange. A cold look flashed across his eyes. Chapter 1382. The strong were respected, and the weak were servants. Not to mention the cruel environment of the Beichen Star Field. This rule was also followed in the Central Territory. Yi Xian had already faintly guessed what kind of goal this woman in front of him had. Although this woman was already married, and her body was filled with a mature charm, she was indeed a rare beauty. However, in Yi Xian's opinion, she was only so. It was impossible for him to have any thoughts about her. In fact, in Yi Xian's heart, this woman had already been sentenced to death. Although she was still alive, she just hadn't encountered the right time. "Madam, you're too polite. You haven't been cleared of the poison, and you have cold blood in your body. You don't have to be so courteous," Yi Xian said with a faint smile. Lingxue doesn't dare to forget Sir's great kindness. However, as members of the Xiao family, we have already violated the family rules. I'm afraid we can't be kind today. Lingxue was not a peerless beauty. She was just a graceful young woman, but often this kind of mature and charming young woman was the most attractive to men. At this moment, her face was full of sadness, which made people want to cherish her. At this moment, Xiao Changhe frowned slightly. He had a panoramic view of his sister-in-law's appearance, and a touch of shame and indignation flashed through his eyes. Xiao Changhe knew very well what kind of person Lingxue was. She was an extremely proud and strange woman. Except for the tender treatment she gave to her dead brother, she usually wouldn't look at any man, let alone show such a weak and pitiful appearance at this moment. Xiao Changhe was not stupid. He had already faintly seen that his sister-in-law's wife was showing goodwill to Yi Xian, and was faintly tempting him. Although this kind of temptation was very subtle, it was real. Xiao Changhe felt ashamed and indignant. He wanted to remind Lingxue, but when he opened his mouth, he saw Lingxue giving him a fierce look. This made him sigh helplessly, and then lower his eyes. Sad and lamentable. In order to survive, the only way out was to rely on the strong. Xiao Changhe had already understood Lingxue's meaning. At this moment, the atmosphere was a little strange. Only the young boy, who was young and ignorant, did not notice the strange atmosphere. Instead, because his mother had been rescued, his little face was full of excitement. "I have an affinity with this child. I once promised him in the ice sea that I would cure your cold blood disease. I will not sit by and watch you and your child suffer this calamity." Yi Xian looked at Lingxue indifferently, which made the young woman's face turn pale. It was as if her thoughts were seen through by Yi Xian. She looked slightly embarrassed and felt ashamed. Yi Xian's lips curled into a playful smile, and then he chuckled. "As expected of a great clan, you're not too late." As Yi Xian's words fell, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out continuously. The entire void rumbled as if thunderclouds were descending. Chi! Chi! Several streaks of light shot into the courtyard, and 3 white-haired old men appeared. Xiao Yuan Yinglingxue, how dare you? An elder with a rough face took a step forward, his voice exploding like thunder. Ninth elder. Looking at the 3 elders, Xiao Changhe exclaimed, and his face instantly turned pale. Xiao Changhe, you still know that I'm the 9th elder? I thought you had forgotten the clan rules, and treated us elders as nothing. Yinglingxue, as the daughter-in-law of the Xiao clan, you are a member of the Xiao clan for life. Although your husband is dead, the rules of the Xiao clan are as such. Useless people must die. The 8th elder spoke gloomily, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Changhe, I'll give you a chance. Capture the mother and son, and your sins will be forgiven. The 7th elder said in a low voice. Looking at the 3 elders of the Xiao clan, Yi Xian looked at them indifferently. From beginning to end, there were no ripples. The mother and son were abandoned by the clan due to their low cultivation. Xiao Changhe was the backbone of the Xiao clan, and he was the clan's resource. Naturally, they would forgive Xiao Changhe. Although this kind of survival rule was cruel, Yi Xian had to admit that according to this system, the clan would indeed prosper and remain in a flourishing state. However, Yi Xian didn't think this system would be flawless. This kind of ruthless family system had its advantages and disadvantages. If a heaven-defying monster appeared and turned against the clan, it would also be the time of the clan's annihilation. Brat, you're the one who killed my Xiao clan's guards and my steward? The 3 elders looked at Yi Xian with cold murderous intent. They had already received news that the uncle and nephew had brought back an outsider, who was obviously an expert invited by them. However, the Xiao clan had always been used to being strong. They didn't think that the uncle and nephew could invite any expert to go against the Xiao clan. So they naturally didn't put Yi Xian in their eyes. The people of the world are ignorant. They always think that they are the main characters of the world, but they don't know that they are just ants floating in the air. The stars won't revolve for a single person. Even if an ant disappears, the world will continue to revolve. This is the cruel world. Yi Xian said indifferently. He was talking about the truth of the world, and also lamenting about these ignorant ants. Brat, I don't know what you're talking about. You're presumptuous in my Xiao clan. Today I'll take your dog life. The 3 elders shouted in unison. The aura of a minor saint spread out, and the whole world rumbled. It also attracted the attention of the main family of the Xiao clan. How can the light of a firefly compete with the brilliance of the moon? Facing the terrifying killing intent of the 3 elders, Yi Xian shook his head in boredom. He could kill these 3 ants with a flick of his finger. With his current cultivation base, it was like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 3 elders were furious. This outsider actually dared to treat them like ants. When they came here, they had already made preparations. If Yi Xian was a grand cultivator, they would definitely appease him, and never mention the matter of the mother and son. If Yi Xian joined the Xiao clan, the matter of the mother and son would naturally be forgotten. However, if Yi Xian wasn't a grand cultivator, they would definitely kill him, and let the people of Ice River City know that the Xiao clan wasn't a place where anyone could be presumptuous. When the 3 elders arrived here, although they couldn't see through Yi Xian's cultivation base, they could feel that Yi Xian's aura was extremely ordinary. There wasn't the aura of a grand cultivator on him. Obviously, he was only a minor saint at most. How could the 3 of them be afraid of this brat? The 3 of them felt relieved. Naturally, they ignored Yi Xian and came here to question the mother and son directly. But now Yi Xian actually treated them like ants. How could the 3 elders who had been in high positions for a long time tolerate this? Monstrous anger rose in their hearts. They must kill Yi Xian. Die! The 3 elders roared. Their aura of a minor saint was released violently. They stomped on the ground and shot towards Yi Xian violently. The whole Xiao clan trembled as if it was going to collapse. Chapter 1383. This is really boring. Yi Xian murmured to himself as he looked at their ignorant and fearless attitude. It was a little overkill for him to kill 3 minor saints with his Dao querying cultivation. However, he had no choice but to do it for the sake of this young man. It's too late to regret now. Even if you kneel down and beg for mercy, I will still take your life. The 3 of them appeared in front of Yi Xian and unleashed all kinds of techniques. The void seemed to be on the verge of being torn apart. The 3 of them were determined to kill Yi Xian. Buzz! The void trembled and ripples spread out. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were moving slightly, and a wisp of the power of time flashed across his eyes. Time and space were still and the world was distorted. The world seemed to be extremely viscous as the boundless power of time spread out. Before the 3 of them could attack Yi Xian, an extremely terrifying scene appeared. Boom! Their flesh and blood melted, and their bones turned into ashes. The 3 of them didn't even have time to scream before they completely disappeared from the world, leaving not even a trace of ashes behind. Such a scene made the people of Shao Mansion, who had been spying on the scene, cry out in alarm. The sound of fleeing footsteps could be heard continuously from outside the side courtyard. It's so boring. A snowflake fell on Yi Xian's hair. The hem of his black robe fluttered in the cold wind. Yi Xian said in a low voice as he strolled towards the mother and son. Madam, please clean yourself first. I will expel your illness at night. Yi Xian said calmly as he came in front of Lingxue. As Yi Xian's words fell, Lingxue woke up from her shock. Her pale cheeks flashed with a blush. Then, she nodded and quickly returned to her room. Yi Xian was slightly startled when he felt the girl's shyness. His eyes became deeper and deeper. Yi Xian's words just now were a bit inappropriate, but it was already too late to redeem himself. Moreover, he didn't care about the etiquette of the mortal world. After all, he wasn't the slightest bit interested in this woman. At most, she was just a tool for him to use. Senior, please come into the room. Xiao Changhe had already respected Yi Xian as a deity. He was very sure that Yi Xian's cultivation was absolutely unimaginably high. Xiao Changhe's expression became even more respectful. That's not appropriate. There are women in the room. I'll stay in the courtyard and enjoy the snowy scenery. Yi Xiao Changhe nodded. Xiao Changhe bitterly smiled and nodded. He already understood Yi Xian's intentions, so he didn't force him. Moreover, Lingxue was his sister-in-law after all. It would be hard for him to accept a strange man moving in with her. The night was like water as snowflakes drifted down. The entire side courtyard fell into silence. Sir, Lingxue greets you. Lingxue bowed gracefully, showing a graceful and noble temperament. The unique charm of a young woman also made Yi Xian look slightly. Lingxue was delighted. It seemed that she was not old, and still had the charm of a young girl. Madam, you are welcome. Please sit cross-legged. Bring me the ice fox. Yi Xian said faintly and ordered them one by one. Soon, the ice fox was brought over by the young man. Lingxue sat cross-legged, waiting for Yi Xian to cast a spell to treat her. Second brother, Yun. Sir is going to cast a spell to treat me. You can go out temporarily. Don't disturb, sir. Before Yi Xian could cast a spell, Lingxue spoke softly. This also made Yi Xian's mouth curve into a strange smile, but he did not say anything. Sister-in-law, you? Xiao Changhe's face was flushed. He noticed that something was wrong when he entered the room. His sister-in-law's makeup was exquisite, and she had changed into a white palace gauze. This was obviously a sign that she was going to give herself to him. Get out. Lingxue looked weak, but she was also a person of her word. Xiao Changhe clenched his fists, but in the end, he could only sigh helplessly and turn to leave. The young man did not notice anything and quickly walked out of the room, afraid that it would affect Yi Xian's casting of a spell to treat Lingxue. The cold blood disease is just yin qi entering the body. This ice fox is an object of extreme yin. It can draw out the cold qi in your body. After pushing through the blood, this disease can be cured. As the uncle and nephew left, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back and spoke faintly. However, a strange look flashed through his eyes when he looked at the woman. Sir, you've given me and my son the grace of being reborn. Lingxue is only a weak woman. I don't have anything to repay, sir. Only this thin willow figure can serve, sir. I hope sir won't dislike me. It had to be said that Lingxue was very bold. She slowly got up from the bed and began to undress herself. Although her face was very shy, there was a firm look in her eyes. Temptation. It was a blatant temptation. Temptation from a mature and charming young woman. If you don't want your family to die, I advise you to stop. Before Lingxue could continue, Yi Xian's voice gradually became cold. The temperature of the entire boudoir suddenly dropped to the freezing point. In an instant, the woman's movements froze, and her blushing cheeks gradually turned pale. Chapter 1384. Sir, you? Lingxue asked in a daze. It was not that she was arrogant. As the young mistress of the Xiao clan, countless people coveted her body. She also knew that her appearance was one of the top 3 in the entire Ice River City. She believed that Yi Xian would definitely want her, and she and her son would have a backer. But at this moment, she suddenly realized that she seemed to be very stupid, because the black-robed man in front of her looked at her, without any human emotions in his eyes. His gray eyes revealed a touch of ruthlessness. You are still too naive, woman, Yi Xian said faintly and casually found a chair to sit down. Sir, could it be, that I am not good enough for you? Lingxue's face was pale. Her heart was pierced fiercely, and she felt ashamed and angry. In fact, when I came here, it was reasonable to say that you would only end up dead. But after thinking about it, I still saved you and didn't take your life. After all, if I used my means to kill you, it wouldn't be of much help to my next plan. Yi Xian's 5 fingers kept tapping on the table, making rhythmic sounds. But when he finished speaking, Lingxue's face was already as white as paper. Her eyes showed a touch of horror when she looked at Yi Xian, because at this moment, Yi Xian was cold and sinister. The way he looked at her didn't contain the slightest bit of human emotion. It was as if he was looking at a weak prey that could devour her at any time. Who are you? At this moment, Lingxue was extremely nervous because she found that Yi Xian was definitely not a righteous great cultivator. Instead, he was filled with a kind of fear that made her heart palpitate. She was afraid that he was an extremely terrifying great demon. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you won't live. Before you die, I want to make a deal with you. I think this deal is a great blessing for you. Yi Xian slowly got up and strolled to Lingxue. He looked down at her in a condescending manner, which made the woman tremble and feel extremely terrified. You want to kill me? Fear appeared in Lingxue's eyes. She had just escaped from danger, and thought that she had found someone to rely on. She did not expect that the person she thought she could rely on was the one who wanted to kill her. No, it's not me who wants to kill you, but you want to die in the hands of the Xiao family. Moreover, I want Xiao Yin to personally witness you being killed by them. Yi Xian said lightly, as if he was talking about something very casual. But when the woman heard his words, her face turned pale. She didn't know why Yi Xian would do such a thing. Perhaps Yi Xian had sensed the woman's thoughts. The corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile as he said, There is a demon's heart hidden in your son's body. This demon's heart has yet to be activated. If I had not appeared, perhaps he would have lived an ordinary life. Perhaps you and your son would have died in the hands of the Xiao clan. But now my appearance has changed everything. I will nurture him into a demon's son who can compete with the strongest seeds. In the future, he might even become an existence like the strongest throughout history. Shouldn't you thank me? Yi Xian's voice was like a devil's as he described the future that Lingxue's youth should have. Lingxue was not stupid. On the contrary, she was a very smart woman. She had already vaguely guessed Yi Xian's purpose. So the deal between you and me is very simple. Your death will draw out the demon's heart in his body. From then on, I will nurture him into an expert. I believe that you will be able to rest in peace in the underworld, right? Yi Xian said lightly. Silence, dead silence, speechlessness. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive. Lingxue did not speak for a long time. Her expression was constantly changing, because she could completely see that Yi Xian was not a kind person at all. What if I don't agree? After several breaths of time, Lingxue raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. You know the answer. Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was very evil and filled with extremely terrifying killing intent. You will kill all of us? Lingxue whispered bitterly. Although she had long guessed this outcome, she still had a trace of hope in her heart. I like smart people. You really didn't let me down, Yi Xian praised. Okay, I promise you that I will play this game with you. But after I die, you have to promise me that you will never hurt Yin. Although Lingxue was ambitious, she was still the youth's mother after all. For the sake of the youth's good life, she could only sacrifice herself. Thank you. Yi Xian smiled and said with a look of satisfaction in his eyes. In the courtyard, the cold winter wind was blowing, and the north wind was biting cold. The uncle and niece were anxiously waiting, wondering if Yi Xian could cure Lingxue's cold blood. The uncle and niece were also constantly pacing in the side courtyard. Creak. The door of the room slowly opened, which also attracted the uncle and niece's attention. They saw Yi Xian and Lingxue strolling out. Lingxue's originally pale little face had recovered its rosy color. She didn't look weak at all. Mother, your cold blood is cured? The youth quickly walked over, his face full of excitement. Thank you, sir, for your help. Mother's cold blood is cured, Lingxue said with a smile. But if one looked carefully, they would find that there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. Obviously, she knew that she didn't have long to live. Thank you for your kindness, senior. Thank you, sir. The uncle and niece hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. Sir, I would like to talk to Yin. Please wait a moment. Lingxue already knew that her life was coming to an end. Naturally, she couldn't bear to part with the youth. Yi Xian naturally agreed, because this would be the last time they would be together. Not to mention that Yi Xian was ruthless and cruel, insisting on forcing Lingxue to her death and separating mother and son forever. If Yi Xian hadn't appeared, Lingxue would have died without a doubt. She would have died under the heaven-returning elixir. Every man for himself. There were so many tragic things in this world. If Yi Xian had a kind heart, he would have died many times over. Moreover, if Yi Xian hadn't appeared, the youth would have died in vain in the ice sea. Yi Xian's appearance saved the youth's life, so Yi Xian didn't feel any guilt in his heart. Mother, what's wrong? Could it be that your cold blood hasn't been cured? After being pulled aside by Lingxue, the youth felt that there was something wrong with his mother, which made him panic. Yin, you have to cultivate well in the future. You have to remember that you can't trust anyone in this world. Only when you're strong enough can you truly survive in this world. Lingxue said in a deep voice. What about Mr. Uncle? The youth was confused. You have to be careful of Mr. Yi. You can cultivate with him, but never trust him. Lingxue secretly warned him through voice transmission. Chapter 1385. Unfortunately, Yi Xian overheard their conversation. However, Yi Xian only smiled faintly at Lingxue's words. He wasn't angry at all. Yi Xian didn't need the youth to trust him. He only saw the youth as a sharp blade in his hand that he would wield at critical moments. That was enough. As the conversation between the mother and son continued, Yi Xian stood in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. No matter how much snow fell from the sky, he didn't move an inch. No one knew Yi Xian's true intentions, nor did they know why Yi Xian was wasting so much time on the youth. However, Yi Xian never did useless things. He'd delayed his own cultivation to come here, because the youth was an extremely important chess piece in his hands. More importantly, this was related to an important matter. Ultimate. That's right, ultimate throughout the ages. Perhaps some people would be confused. What was the relationship between the youth and ultimate throughout the ages? Could it be that Yi Xian wants to nurture him into the strongest of all time in the next Yuanhui? After all, Yi Xian was only a Dao-seeking realm cultivator. Even he hadn't become an ultimate, so how could he possibly nurture this youth into an ultimate in the ages? In truth, Yi Xian's goal was simple. The instigator of all of this was the Lord of the Extreme Fiend. Don't forget that millions of years ago, Yi Xian had ascended to the pinnacle and used many forbidden techniques to kill the Extreme Fiend. causing him to fall in the primal chaos. However, Yi Xian hadn't forgotten that the Lord of the Extreme Fiend was the ruler of the ninth period. Every ultimate in the ages would fuse with the heavenly heart of chaos of a period. When the Extreme Fiend died, the heavenly heart of chaos's aura disappeared without a trace. Even the undying Heaven Lord and the others couldn't stop it. Yi Xian had a feeling that although the Lord of the Extreme Fiend was dead, the heavenly heart of chaos still contained the last bit of his will before he died. It would definitely search for his successor. In the Chaos verse, there were 12 periods of time. In total, there were 12 of them, and not a single one could be missing. That was one of the fundamental principles of the Chaos verse. Hence, Yi Xian's plan was very simple. He wanted to nurture this youth into a demonic son, and lure out the heart of chaos, left behind by the supreme demon. Then, he would have the youth assimilate this heart of chaos, and replace the supreme demon lord, the supreme expert of the ninth epoch. And this was Yi Xian's true motive. Yi Xian wasn't the only one plotting this. The other strongest of all time were probably searching everywhere for the heavenly heart of chaos, left behind by the Lord of Extreme Demons. Finding the heavenly heart of chaos would depend on their own abilities. Yi Xian was very confident. He was also certain of one thing. As long as he could draw out the youth's demonic heart, coupled with the technique he had imparted to the youth, he would definitely be able to achieve his goal. Before Yi Xian had drawn out the shadow of eternity from the river of time, the 8 sovereigns had each planted their own supreme powers in his body. Although Yi Xian had refined the 8 supreme powers and greatly increased his cultivation, the mysteries within were still engraved in his heart. As long as he imparted the Supreme Demon Lord's mysteries to the youth, and had him join the Supreme Demon Sky Palace, he would definitely be able to slowly draw out the heavenly heart of chaos, left behind by the Supreme Demon after his death. Haha! Suddenly, hearty laughter rang out. A middle-aged man strolled into the side courtyard. This person's black hair was shining brightly, and his battle robe seemed to fit him very well. His face was gentle and refined, but it did not lose the sense of majesty. 2 white-haired elders followed him into the side courtyard. The 2 of them were half a step behind the middle-aged man, and their attitude towards him was very respectful. Ma Patriarch? Looking at the middle-aged man who walked into the side courtyard, Xiao Changhe exclaimed loudly. The mother and son looked at the person with a slight change in expression. They did not expect the patriarch of the Xiao clan to come here personally. Xiao Changhe's exclamation did not make the middle-aged man feel anything. He looked straight at Yi Xian, then smiled and said, "I am Xiao Haichuan, the patriarch of the Xiao clan. May I know your name?" Xiao Haichuan's attitude was extremely humble, which also made the mother and son and Xiao Changhe stunned. In their impression, Xiao Haichuan was swift and decisive. Although he looked gentle on the outside, he was actually cold-blooded and ruthless. However, such a dignified and unfathomable patriarch of the Xiao clan actually cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Xian. This made the mother and son and Xiao Changhe feel extremely shocked. Yi Xian saw through this person's cultivation at a glance, and a playful look flashed in his eyes. This person was actually a great saint. In this small ice river city, he could indeed be called an overlord. Yi Tian from the Central Territory. Central Territory? Xiao Haichuan's expression suddenly changed, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. What kind of place was the Central Territory? It was the center of the 5 regions of chaos. All the supreme orthodoxies and great sects gathered in the Central Territory. The 5 regions spanned hundreds of millions of miles, and there was no end to it. The Central Territory was said to be boundless, and it was also the center of the 5 regions. It was impossible to cross it without the cultivation of the yin-yang realm. Xiao Haichuan's mind raced, and his attitude became even more humble. There was a warm smile on his face, but there was already a huge wave of shock in his heart. "I didn't expect you to come from the Central Territory. Since you have graced us with your presence in the Ice River City's Xiao clan, I have already prepared a banquet and invite you to come. We can sit down and discuss Dao to welcome you." Xiao Haichuan did not mention anything about the mother and son. He did not even say a word about the 3 elders killed by Yi Xian. He invited Yi Xian very humbly, and his words were extremely sincere. "Sir, you can't go." The young man trembled slightly and stopped him. No one knew how terrifying the Shao clan was better than him. Although he did not know the cultivation of the Shao clan master, there were many supreme elders and patriarchs above him. If he went to the banquet, Yi Xian would be in danger. Since Yi Tian has graced our Shao clan with his presence, how can we not treat our guests well? Xiao Haichuan smiled, but his voice was slightly gloomy and full of threat. "It's all right. Since the Shao clan master has invited me, I still have to give him face," Yi Xian said with a smile, but there was a cruel and playful look in his eyes. Because a killing scene was about to happen, and the young man's transformation would begin here. Yi Xian's smile caused Xiao Haichuan to be shocked. Could it be that this person was really a cultivator from the Great Central Region? Furthermore, he had an unimaginable cultivation. So he wasn't afraid of the Shao clan in the slightest? Suppressing the shock in his heart, Xiao Haichuan said gently, "Fellow, please." Yi Xian walked out slowly, and Ying Lingshua's face turned pale because she was about to face death. This was also her promise to Yi Xian. Cold Cloud Pavilion. Under the invitation of the Shao clan master, Yi Xian walked in slowly, followed by the mother and son and Xiao Changhe. Seeing that Yi Xian had already entered the trap, Xiao Haichuan's expression changed, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He murmured, "Boy, if you know what's good for you, you still have a chance to live. Otherwise, you will be reduced to ashes today." Chapter 1386. The entire Cold Cloud Pavilion was extremely luxurious, showing the style of a family. Yi Xian's gaze landed on a person sitting cross-legged on a praying mat in front of him. Judging from his cultivation, he was only at the Saint King realm. The Saint King realm was considered an overlord in the entire chaotic world, and was even more supreme in this small ice river city. However, to Yi Xian, the so-called Saint King realm was no different from an ant. If he wanted to kill him, he could do so with a flick of his finger. What made Yi Xian laugh the most was that even though the little Saint King in front of him had his cultivation damaged, he still had a dignified look on his face, as if he was a peerless figure. "Little ant, pretentious." These simple words showed Yi Xian's sarcasm. But today he was not the main character. The real main character was the young man behind him. As if strolling in the courtyard, Yi Xian walked forward slowly, while the young man and his mother followed behind nervously. The more fearless Yi Xian was, the more the Shao clan head felt uneasy. The light in his eyes kept changing, and he quickly followed Yi Xian. As for the mother and son, they were no longer in his heart. As the Shao clan head, the only thing he cared about was Yi Xian, and he was constantly guessing what level Yi Xian's cultivation was at. The smoke was faint, the sound of the zither was melodious, and 4 beautiful maids were dancing. This person had black hair and a white beard, and he looked very dignified, making people feel awe at a glance. He was watching the maids dance indifferently. "You killed several of my clansmen, and you still dare to come here. Are you not afraid of death?" The Shao clan's ancestor coldly spoke. His eyes looked towards Yi Xian, as the might of a saint king that blotted out the sky and covered the earth burst forth. The Shao clan ancestor's aura was terrifying. Although it was only directed at Yi Xian, the rest of the aura made the few people tremble, and they already felt a sense of submission. Dong! Yi Xian took a step forward, his Saint King aura instantly disappearing as a hint of disdain appeared on Yi Xian's face. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to draw out the young man's demonic heart, he would have smashed this kind of trash into meat paste with a single slap. How could he allow this kind of ant to put on airs in front of him? Thump, thump, thump. It was as if thunderclouds were rumbling, as if war drums were beating. Yi Xian slowly walked forward, and with every step he took, the entire hall shook uncontrollably. The surrounding walls continuously cracked, and the murderous aura of death howled out. Such an unforeseen event completely stunned everyone. The young man and his mother were even more excited. However, the Shao clan head's body and mind were trembling, because no one knew better than him how terrifying the ancestor was. The ancestor had already stepped into the Saint King realm. Although he was only a lesser Saint King, he was still a Saint King. He originally thought that Yi Xian would immediately be suppressed by the ancestor's aura when he entered this place, and would even kneel down and submit to the Shao clan. He didn't expect that this person would actually shatter the ancestor's aura, and instead release a soaring killing intent that suppressed the ancestor. This scene made the Shao clan head suck in a breath of cold air. He suddenly had an extremely bad feeling in his heart, and a hint of worry flashed across his eyes. Haha! All of a sudden, the Shao clan ancestor laughed loudly, and his originally incomparably dignified face turned gentle. He slowly got up and personally walked down the stairs. He cupped his hands towards Yi Xian and said, "This old man is Xiao Baina. I originally wanted to make a small joke with fellow Taoist, but please don't take it seriously." The Shao clan ancestor's expression changed at the drop of a hat, completely losing the might of a Saint King. At this moment, his attitude was extremely humble, which also made the mother and son stunned. Yi Xian's lips curled into a playful smile. "Oh? Don't tell me you won't avenge the deaths of your clan members in my hands?" Haha. Fellow Taoist, you must be joking. If my descendants are disrespectful to you, they are disrespectful to me. If such an ignorant ant dies, so be it. Why would my Shao clan seek revenge on you? The Shao clan ancestor's tone was sincere, without the slightest hint of reluctance, as if the one who flew into a rage just now was another person. Hand over the antidote for the heaven-returning elixir. If you can't hand over the antidote, there's no need for your Shao clan to exist. Yi Xian did not want to waste his breath on such an ant at all, and directly began his plan. Wah! Suddenly, just as Yi Xian finished speaking, Lingshua's face instantly turned pale, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her weak body instantly went limp. "Mother? What's wrong?" In the next moment, the young man's expression changed drastically. He originally thought that Lingxua had already been saved by Yi Xian, but he did not expect such an unforeseen event to occur. Although I can treat her frost blood disease, she consumed the so-called heaven-returning elixir previously. This poison is too overbearing, and even I am unable to save her. Only by giving her the antidote can she save her life. Yi Xian pretended to sigh, showing a helpless expression. Of course, all of this was Yi Xian's arrangement. A small amount of heaven-returning elixir was not difficult for him at all. However, Lingxua had to die in the hands of the Shao clan in order to stimulate the demon heart in the young man's body. "Xiao Baina, hand over the antidote." The young man's eyes instantly turned blood red as he looked at the Shao clan's patriarch furiously. He had already forgotten his respect for the Shao clan, and the veins on his forehead were even wriggling like maggots. Antidote. The Shao clan's patriarch's face was slightly pale as he looked at Yi Xian with extreme fear. There was no antidote for this heaven-returning elixir at all. Anyone who consumed it would definitely die. So where could he go to give the young man the antidote? This? The Shao clan's patriarch was anxious. He was not afraid of the young man, but he was extremely wary of Yi Xian, because the aura that Yi Xian revealed just now had clearly surpassed the Saint King realm. If the other party attacked him, the Shao clan would definitely face a great calamity today. Pooh! Suddenly, a mouthful of black blood spurted out from Lingshua's mouth. Her originally dignified face was already filled with black qi, and the vitality around her began to slowly dissipate. "Mother!" The young man roared in grief, completely panicking. He kept shaking his mother's body, which was beginning to turn cold, as tears kept rolling down from his eyes. "Sir, please save my mother, I beg you." In the next moment, the young man suddenly knelt at Yi Xian's feet, sorrowfully begging Yi Xian for help. "Sigh!" Yi Xian sighed helplessly. "It's not that I don't want to save her, but there's nothing I can do." Men, quickly ask the clan's divine doctor to come here." The Shao clan's patriarch was panicking. Although he could not feel Yi Xian's killing intent, his heart was trembling, as if something extremely bad was about to happen. Soon, as the young man cried in grief, a white-haired old man quickly walked into Cold Heaven Pavilion and quickly took Lingshua's pulse. This old man is really powerless. After several dozen breaths, this so-called divine doctor said in shame, because this heaven-returning elixir was too vicious. With his medical skills, he could not save Lingxue at all. In fact, even if this divine doctor could save Lingxue, Yi Xian would not let Lingxue live. After all, this woman's death was the turning point in the young man's life. You trash, you can't cure my mother. Go to hell. Chapter 1387. Roar. The young man's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared like a ferocious beast. He pulled out the long saber hanging at his waist, and chopped off the doctor's head. You? The expression of the Shao clan's ancestor changed. A trace of anger flashed through his eyes, but he still endured it, because Yi Xian's existence made him too fearful. Actually, I have another way, but Yi Xian pretended to sigh and did not continue. However, the young man seemed to have grasped at a life-saving straw. He kowtowed to Yi Xian frantically and cried out, "Sir, you're someone as powerful as the Tongtian. Please save my mother. I'm willing to do anything. I have a secret technique, called the blood exchange technique. However, this technique is too cruel and vicious. It kills a life and takes its blood, soul, and essence, and then fuses it into your mother's body. Perhaps it can save her life," Yi Xian said. "Yuna, no. Suddenly, Lingxue struggled to open her eyes as she was dying. She held the young man's hand tightly and shook her head weakly. Perhaps at the last moment of her life, Lingxue finally understood one thing. Although she had promised Yi Xian to sacrifice herself, she also realized that Yi Xian was a devil. If her son followed him in the future, he would not have a good ending. "Mother, I won't let you die," the young man said sorrowfully and looked at Yi Xian with hope. "It's easy to save your mother, but you have to kill everyone in the Shao clan and use their blood to replenish the vitality in your mother's body. Are you willing?" Yi Xian's expression was calm, but his words were like the devil's, full of bewitchment. When the young man heard it, his eyes became even fiercer. I'm willing. The young man already showed signs of demonization. The blood in his eyes became more and more intense, and he began to act under Yi Xian's guidance. "Xian Mo, I bestow upon you the extreme devil-slaughtering power. Go exterminate the entire Shao clan. Only then will you be able to save your mother's life." Rumble. At this moment, an extreme demonic aura rose around Yi Xian's body. The dense demonic light was boundless and dark, as if even the sun star couldn't dispel this wisp of darkness. Boom. Yi Xian was smiling, but his smile was too devilish and cruel. He formed a series of seals with both hands and unleashed terrifying demonic runes, all of which surged towards the youth. This strand of extreme demonic force was far too terrifying. When it entered the young man's body, it caused his skin to explode. Large amounts of blood flowed out as the young man roared out in extreme pain. However, in the next moment, an extremely terrifying demonic light rose around the young man. After all, this was the extreme demonic force, known as one of the 12 ultimate powers. The pain it caused the young man was simply unimaginable. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and quietly watched the young man endure the extreme demonic force. This method of his was too risky. After all, the extreme demonic force was the ultimate power, and the young man's body was too weak. If he couldn't withstand this power, he would explode and die. However, Yi Xian believed that he didn't choose the wrong person. If the young man really couldn't withstand the extreme demonic force, it would prove that he was a good-for-nothing, and there was no need to waste time on him. "No, don't let him go." Suddenly, Lingxue cried out in grief. Tears kept falling from her eyes. She really began to regret it, because the young man was too miserable at this moment. This was a sign that he was about to demonize. "Senior, what's your purpose?" Xiao Chenghe couldn't hold it in any longer. He questioned Yi Xian with a serious face, and the steel saber in his hand had already been unsheathed. "Extreme demonic chaos, the fall of all things. If you want to save your mother, kill him." Yi Xian's words were like a demonic voice that buried the soul, entering the young man's ears without missing a word. At this moment, the young man's demonic light was surging, and his scarlet eyes were blooming with a terrifying demonic light. "Kill, kill, kill." The young man roared in his sleep, and suddenly turned to look at Xiao Changhe. The steel saber in his hand was completely covered by the demonic light, and the terrifying fluctuations caused the void to explode inch by inch. Yin'er, wake up. I'm your uncle. Xiao Changhe's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted at the young man, hoping to wake him up from his demonization. Uncle, uncle? The young man's demonic light was surging, but his demonic qi began to stagnate. Obviously, he still had his own consciousness, and had not completely entered the state of demonization. Such a scene made Yi Xian frown slightly. He was still too anxious. At this moment, although the young man's demonic heart had been aroused, it had not been completely released. If you don't kill him, your mother will die without a doubt. Yi Xian continued to bewitch the young man. The sky-bearing skill began to evolve the extreme demonic power, and he once again injected it into the young man. Roar! Kill! In the next moment, the young man instantly went crazy. Under Xiao Changhe's dull gaze, the young man slashed at him with his saber, directly cutting his uncle in half. A large amount of blood sprayed on the young man's face, and he was instantly stunned. Yin'er! Lingxue cried out in grief. She had never thought that her son would kill Xiao Changhe. This was simply too cruel for her to accept. What did I do? Perhaps Lingxue's voice had awakened the young man's mind. He stared blankly at the two halves of Xiao Changhe's corpse, and his body and mind began to tremble. The signs of demonization were gradually receding. First step to kill. Second step to become an extreme demon. Kill all the people of the Xiao clan, and plunder their blood, soul and essence. Yi Xian was chanting in a low voice in the language of the extreme demon, and also to arouse the demonic heart in the young man's heart. Kill! The young man's body trembled, and the extreme demon light gushed out again. He suddenly waved his hand at the Xiao clan's old ancestor and the others, and a terrifying demonic force burst out. Let's go! The Xiao clan's old ancestor had already sensed that something was wrong. Not only was the young man's aura terrifying him, but what terrified him the most was Yi Xian. Qi! The young man slashed out with his saber, and the extreme demon force burst out, turning the entire Cold Cloud Pavilion into ashes. The extreme demon saber light was so terrifying that even the Xiao clan's old ancestor, who was at the Saint King realm, could not resist it. Pooh! The Xiao clan's old ancestor was directly killed on the spot, and his two halves were dripping with blood. He could not even resist a single blow. After all, the extreme demon force was the strongest force. Although the young man could not exert its full power, it was still not something the Xiao clan's old ancestor could resist. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Yi Xian said ruthlessly. His voice was like the sound of Sanskrit, instantly driving the young man into a state of madness. He turned into a black light, and began to slaughter the people of the Xiao clan. Help! Don't kill me! Cries and pleas for mercy could be heard endlessly. A large amount of blood dyed the Xiao clan red, and broken limbs could be seen everywhere. The young man shuttled through the Xiao clan, gradually turning the area into a slaughterhouse. Demon, you will die a horrible death. Lingxue cried out in grief. She witnessed Yi Xian turn her son into a terrifying killing machine with her own eyes. She looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of resentment and curses. Ha ha ha. Yi Xian walked up to Lingxue, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He patted the girl's shoulder affectionately and said, "You can go in peace. He will grow into a figure at the peak of the chaos in the future. Actually, there's nothing wrong with being a demon. What do you think? You will die a horrible death." Lingxue cursed bitterly, but her body had already begun to turn black and purple. Obviously, the overbearing toxicity of the heaven-returning elixir had already invaded her entire body. Chapter 1388. Many people have cursed me to die a horrible death. You're not the first and definitely not the last. In fact, you should thank me. If it weren't for me, not only would you have died today, but your son would have died too. At least he would have survived. Shouldn't you thank me? Yi Xian whispered faintly. He was telling his reason. Although his reason was extremely evil, it was indeed as he said if one thought about it carefully. Without Yi Xian's appearance, The mother and son were doomed to die. However, although what Yi Xian did seemed cruel, it did allow the young man to survive. Kill! The roar of a ferocious beast resounded through the air. The young man had already slaughtered his way to the point of madness. His entire aura started to turn cold and ruthless. After he slaughtered everyone in the Shao clan, the light of the extreme devil completely enveloped him. Mother! Mother! A beast-like roar came from the young man's mouth. He walked toward Lingxue with a blood-stained saber in his hand. Even if he was covered by the power of the extreme devil, there was still a touch of spiritual light in his blood-red eyes. Such a scene made Yi Xian frown. He didn't expect the young man to be able to maintain a trace of sanity and not be demonized at all. Although the heart of the devil began to appear in his body, it was still suppressed by his rationality. It's hard to be demonized when there's something in the heart. Yi Xian whispered. He had already seen the young man's state at the moment. Obviously, Lingxue was the young man's sustenance, which allowed him to maintain his sanity. See, sir, they're all dead. Save my mother. The young man staggered over. The blood-soul essence in his hand was extremely strong. Obviously, he hoped that Yi Xian could perform the blood exchange technique to saving Lingxue's life. It's too late. The poison has entered her internal organs, and even her soul has begun to dim. I can't save her now. Yi Xian pretended to sigh. Impossible. Hearing such bad news, the young man's demonic light soared. His remaining spiritual consciousness began to collapse. Obviously, he was completely stimulated by the bad news. In order to further provoke the young man, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with cruelty. It seemed that he had no choice but to letting Lingxue die tragically in front of the young man. Otherwise, if this trend continued, he would die from Qigong deviation before the young man was truly possessed. At the next moment, Lingxue cried out weakly in pain. Her body began to melt, and large amounts of flesh and blood began to melt into blood. It was obvious that she was about to die. Such a scene caused the young man's eyes to go bloodshot, and his mind suffered an unimaginable shock. However, he was unable to save Lingxue's life at all, and this caused him to go mad with pain. Yinar. At the last moment of her life, Lingxue was in so much pain that she couldn't speak. She could only curse Yi Xian to the end of her life. Mother! Roar! The Tongtian moved, and the demonic light rushed into the sky. The young man's chest was violently beating. The demonic heart that had been hidden in his body for a long time was finally unsealed at this moment. The extremely terrifying demonic qi was released, and the sky of the entire Ice River City became as dark as ink. Massacre the city and kill everyone. From now on, you will have no relatives or friends in this world. Everything is nothing but pigs and dogs in your eyes. Go and kill your way out of the Tongtian Great Path. Truly turn into a ruthless demon, and fight for the position of the strongest supreme demon. Yi Xian smiled, and his voice sounded like a curse in the young man's ears. This also caused the young man to roar to the heavens. His whole body turned into a black light and rushed into the sky. Kill, kill, kill. The supreme demon world killed everything. At this moment, the young man was completely demonized. His demonic heart illuminated the past and present. The long blade in his hand raised a waterfall of heaven and earth. He was like an ancient ferocious beast killing everything in the Ice River City. All living creatures in the city would become bones under his feet. Don't kill me. What is this thing? In the next moment, the entire Ice River City was filled with cries. All sorts of cries for mercy could be heard. However, as the massacre continued, these cries grew softer and softer. A thick stench of blood soared into the sky. The supreme demon world was ruthless. Only the demonic nature of killing was eternal. At this moment, the young man was massacring the city and venting the depression in his body. Just as Yi Xian said, he would have no relatives or friends from now on. He would be alone. Although the world was big, there was no one to accompany him. When this loneliness swept over him, he was no longer the young Yi Xian, but had truly become another person. And this person's name was Yi Xian Mo. In the Shao clan residence, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. At his feet was Ying Lingshua's skeleton. A strong wind blew, causing Yi Xian's hair to dance in the wind. His black robes fluttered. The smell of blood filled the void, but Yi Xian's expression was calm and unruffled. His entire being was extremely calm. Your death has helped him. This is also a good deed for you. In the future, he will also become the new Supreme Demon Lord. This is my compensation to you. Yi Xian looked down at Ying Lingshua's skeleton indifferently, and let out a long sigh. The strong were always strong, and the weak were like dogs. Yi Xian had always believed in this principle. Ying Lingxua was weak, so she was played in the palm of his hand. This was the tragedy of the weak. If Ying Lingxua was stronger than Yi Xian, this would not have happened. In the world there was only the strong and the weak. There was never right or wrong. If you were weak, you deserved to die. If you were weak, you were a dog. Only the strong could dominate everything. This was also the cruel law of the chaotic universe. What was fairness? What was kindness? Fairness was the rule that the strong set for the weak. Kindness was also something that the strong flaunted. In the face of true benefits, these hypocritical things would all be torn to pieces by the strong, and the weak could only be sacrificed for benefits. From ancient times until now, this principle had not changed in the slightest. Kill. Yi Xianemo had already become a demon. His demon heart provided him with extremely terrifying power. Coupled with the ultimacy of the supreme demon that Yi Xian had injected into his body, he was the great demon of this world. It had to be said that although the mystical demon body was known to be top-notch, the most important thing was the demon heart in his body. Yi Xian also valued this demon heart of his. Once this demon heart was released, coupled with the ultimacy of the supreme demon, Yi Xianemo stepped into the Saint King realm in an instant. Except for the fact that he had not established his own Saint King world, Yi Xianemo could be said to have reached the heavens in a single bound. The stronger the demonic nature of the supreme demon, the more terrifying their cultivation would be. This was also the ultimacy of the supreme demon. As Yi Xianmo's demonic nature became stronger, his cultivation would also increase day by day. When he merged with the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the Supreme Demon Lord, he would be able to inherit the position of the Supreme Demon Lord. Of course, this still required Yi Xian to slowly plan for Yi Xianemo. After all, this kind of thing could not be done overnight. Perhaps some people would ask why Yi Xian did not obtain the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the Supreme Demon Lord himself. Why did he not become the Supreme Demon Lord himself? Chapter 1389. Moreover, if Yi Xian merged with the heavenly heart of chaos and inherited the seat of the Supreme Demonic Lord, how would Yi Xian be able to control him? The reason was simple. Yi Xian's ambition was not just to become the Supreme Demonic Lord. He wanted to surpass the Supreme Demonic Lord, and even surpass the so-called taboo characters. Moreover, the Supreme Demonic Lord's seat was not compatible with him. Yi Xian wanted to walk his own path. Although he had the demonic nature, he could control it freely. Even if he obtained the heavenly heart of chaos left behind by the Supreme Demonic Lord, he could not become the Supreme Demonic Lord. It was the same principle as how water and fire could not coexist. If Yi Xian really inherited the Supreme Demonic Lord's seat, Yi Xian naturally had the means to control him. Moreover, Yi Xian also believed that he could truly become the Supreme Demonic Lord before Yi Xian became the Supreme Demonic Lord. He might even be able to wrestle with the taboo characters. The strong were invincible, and the strong were confident. Yi Xian had never lacked an invincible heart. He believed that he must be the strongest. If he had fear in his heart, he would not have reached where he was today. Kill. The massacre continued. The demonic roar shook the sky. The entire glacier city was covered in snow. However, the entire glacier city had turned into a living hell. Severed limbs could be seen everywhere on the streets. The snow-covered city was already dyed red with blood. Time passed by bit. The creatures in the Ice River City gradually died down until it turned into a dead city. There was no more movement. Only Yi Xuanma's angry roar could be heard. The 6 desires are emotionless. The world is heartless. This child has finally been demonized. From now on, he can become the sharpest blade in my hand. Wherever my blade points, I will kill them all. Wonderful, wonderful. Yi Xian clapped his hands and lightly laughed. The corners of his mouth curled into a trace of praise. In his eyes, the lives of the living beings in the city were nothing more than mediocre. The most important thing was to be able to create a demon son that he wanted. How dare you? Which demon dares to massacre an entire city? Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura covered the sky and covered the earth. That sword light cut through the clouds of heaven and earth, and the firmament for thousands of miles shook. Clearly, the slaughter of the living beings in Ice River City had alarmed a certain almighty Qi. The sword split the sky, causing the world to explode. This sword was like a stream of stars, and it was filled with yin and yang qi. Clearly, this person was a terrifying figure at the yang birth realm. Bang! Wow! The sky exploded and the mountains and rivers collapsed. The sword landed directly on Yi Xuanma's body, causing him to fall from the sky. A large amount of demonic blood spurted out. How dare you massacre a city in my lunar sky sect's territory? Today I won't let you live. Qi. A woman in white appeared in the sky above the Ice River City. Yin and yang qi revolved around her, and the ice autumn water sword in her hand exploded with a terrifying sword light. The clouds in the sky within millions of miles were trembling. Her power was simply terrifying to the extreme. On the other hand, although Yi Xianmo had already been possessed by the devil, his cultivation was no match for this woman's at all. Therefore he was completely knocked out by this blow. Slay evil, slay evil, slay. The woman in white was incomparably cold. With a slash of her sword, the yin and yang energies turned the world upside down. Apparently, she was going to kill Yi Xuanma on the spot. Clang! Suddenly, a dark figure blocked in front of Yi Xuanma. With a flick of his finger, he shattered the woman's sword light. Then, with his hands behind his back, he looked at the woman calmly. Who are you? The woman in white's expression changed. She did not dare to say that she had used 100% of her cultivation in that attack, but at least 60%. However, this man in black who had suddenly appeared had easily broken her attack. Moreover, the most shocking thing for the woman in white was that she could not see through his cultivation. Did this not mean that his cultivation was much higher than hers? How dare a mere young life realm cultivator act so presumptuously in front of me? Looks like you're tired of living? At this moment, Yi Xian was in a good mood. After all, he had finally made Yi Xuanma into the devil's son he wanted. However, he did not expect that someone would come out of nowhere. This immediately put him in a bad mood. When Yi Xian was in a bad mood, he would want to kill someone. Therefore, this woman in white was probably in danger. I'm Lin Qing, of the Lunar Sky Sect. May I know where you are from, and what's your name? The woman in white frowned slightly. Fear flashed across her eyes as she looked at Yi Xian. Get lost. Yi Xian did not want to bother with this woman. He had already achieved his goal, and naturally did not want to create more trouble. You? When had Lin Qing ever suffered such humiliation? She was the third elder of the Lunar Sky Sect. Wherever she went, she would be treated as an honored guest. However, today, she was insulted by a stranger. Although Lin Qing was burning with anger, she did not lose her mind. She could completely sense that Yi Xian's cultivation was much higher than hers. Therefore, she did not dare to offend him easily. Fellow Taoist, this demon has already violated the taboo of the Grand Yin Heavenly Sect by massacring the entire city. As the Inspector Heavenly Ambassador of the North, I naturally have to punish him. Please do me a favor. Lin Qing suppressed her anger and said, Lunar Sky Sect, Northern Region Inspector Heavenly Ambassador? Yi Xian frowned slightly. He had never heard of these two names. However, Yi Xian did not need to think too much about it. It should be a great sect in the Northern Star Field. Looking at Yi Xian's frown, Lin Qing's eyes moved and said, I presume you are not from the Northern Star Field? Lin Qing was very smart. The Northern Region Alliance and the Lunar Sky Sect were famous. All the cultivators in the Northern Region knew about them. Yi Xian looked puzzled. Lin Qing or was enough to determine that Yi Xian was not from the northern star field. He was probably a powerful figure from another field. Suddenly, two flowing lights streaked across the sky and appeared in front of Lin Qing. One of them was tall and handsome, while the other was thin. Obviously, they were her companions. Fourth Elder, a demon has massacred the city. I wonder who this friend is, and why he wants to protect this demon. Lin Qing said in a low voice. Humph. The handsome young man's expression changed. He immediately looked at Yi Xian. However, he was in the extreme realm, which was one realm lower than Lin Qing. How dare you, evil demon? How dare you protect the demon? Surrender now, or we will kill you. The handsome young man shouted. Ignorant dog. Yi Xian's eyes turned cold. He did not have time to waste on this person. His 5 fingers suddenly stretched out toward the sky. Suddenly the sky and earth froze. A giant palm suddenly fell toward the young man. Bang! Yi Xian's cultivation was at the Dao querying realm, and his battle prowess was terrifying to the extreme. With this great technique, the valiant youth didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. He was instantly shattered by the giant palm, turning into a bloody mist that filled the sky, and his soul scattered between heaven and earth. How is this possible? The next moment Lin Qing's face turned pale. She took a few steps back and looked at Yi Xian with fear in her eyes. Chapter 1390. She knew that Yi Xian was very strong. Otherwise, he would not have been able to break her sword light so easily. However, she did not expect Yi Xian to be so strong that he could obliterate an extreme cultivator with just one strike. You're in the Dao querying realm? Lin Qing asked in a trembling voice. Drops of cold sweat dripped from her forehead. It was obvious that she had encountered a Dao querying realm cultivator. You sure have a lot of nonsense to say. I'll send you on your way. Rumble. Yi Xian raised his 5 fingers. It was as if he was lifting up the sky. Terrifying waves of energy swept across the area. It was as if the strike could destroy the heavens and earth. However, just as Yi Xian was about to kill this woman with one strike, his face froze. The great technique that he had gathered dissipated instantly. He looked towards the skinny man. He saw that the man was dressed in black. His skin was slightly sallow, and his eyes were slightly small. He gave off a wretched feeling. Anyone who looked at him would not like him. Elder, leave quickly. I'll stop this man. The man shouted righteously. He even urged Lin Qing to escape. Deacon Huang, I'm sorry. Lin Qing instantly turned into a ray of light and escaped. She did not know why Deacon Huang, who had always been timid, chose to stand in front of her at this critical moment. However, she did not think too much about it. After all, facing a Dao querying realm cultivator was a dead end. The only right choice was to escape. Deacon Huang had just entered the Supreme Saint realm. It was reasonable for her to use his life in exchange for hers. Lin Qing disappeared instantly. Only Yi Xian, Deacon Huang, and the unconscious Yi Xian were left in this area. Logically speaking, if Yi Xian wanted to kill someone, this person would definitely die. There was no way he could escape from his control. However, when Yi Xian saw Deacon Huang, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. His face actually revealed a long-lost joy. Therefore, Yi Xian did not stop Lin Qing from escaping. Instead, he generously spared her life. Sir. When Deacon Huang addressed Yi Xian as Mr., his originally calm expression began to become excited. His slightly wretched appearance warmed Yi Xian's heart. Deacon Huang was naturally Fatso Huang. He was also Yi Xian's most loyal confidant. It was unexpected that after thousands of years, the two of them would meet again in the North Star sector. After so many years, I almost thought you were dead. Yi Xian laughed and scolded. Fatso Huang trotted towards Yi Xian and gave Yi Xian a big hug. His face was filled with excitement. Ha ha ha, how could Fatso Huang dare to die? If I die, I won't be able to see Mr. anymore. Although thousands of years had passed, Fatso Huang's character had not changed at all. He was still as humorous as before. Although his squinted eyes looked wretched, the look in his eyes when he looked at Yi Xian was extremely loyal. I knew you were born despicable and shameless. You're full of evil tricks. You must still be alive in this world. Yi Xian laughed and scolded Fatso Huang as he punched him in the chest. Mister, after being separated from you for so many years, I don't know what to say. Fatso Huang smiled bitterly. In these thousands of years, he had been through a lot. He had finally stepped into the Great Saint Realm and became a small deacon in the Grand Yin Sky sect. This is not the place to talk. Let's go. Yi Xian rolled up his sleeves and took the unconscious Yi Xianmo and Fatso Huang away. The three of them instantly disappeared from the Ice River City. It was snowing heavily on the cold mountain. On the peak of Mount Han, on this snowy day, a pavilion towered over Mount Han. Two figures sat across from each other. A pot of fine wine was burning on a white jade table, the fragrance of wine constantly wafting out from it. Mister, I'd like to propose a toast to you. Fatso Huang filled Yi Xian's cup with wine. Then, they clinked their cups and drank it in one gulp. Then they both burst into laughter. After so many years, you've just stepped into the Great Saint Realm. Your progress is too slow. Yi Xian teased. Mister, I don't have your aptitude. I'm already satisfied that I can step into the Great Saint Realm. Naturally, I can't compare with you. Fatso Huang laughed. I know you don't like to cultivate. It's just that the 5 regions of chaos are full of dangers. It's not like the untainted land. I'm always worried about your and Beichen's safety. Now that I see you, I'm relieved. Yi Xian was gratified. Hee mister, you underestimate me. Although my cultivation is not good, I know the way of survival like the back of my hand. I've been cultivating wholeheartedly for thousands of years. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to see you again. Fatso Huang said excitedly. Is Beichen with you? The two chatted casually for a while. Then, Yi Xian finally asked about Gu Beichen's whereabouts. Don't worry, mister. Beichen is doing much better than me. He's already the first spiritual son of the Sun Sky sect. He's famous in the entire Beichen star field. As Fatty Huang spoke, he began to tell the story of how they came to the Northern Star domain, causing Yi Xian to listen attentively. It turned out that when Yi Xian and the others encountered the space bugs, Yi Xian opened a bloody path for them to escape. Needless to say, Luo Ho, Yuan Ling, and the others, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen's cultivation were the weakest. Their relationship was also the best. Naturally, they took care of each other. In the end, they escaped from the space bugs. However, the two of them were seriously injured. They eventually fell into the Beichen star field and separated on that day. Fatso Huang was lucky. Although he was seriously injured, his life was not in danger. The Taiyin Sky sect happened to pass by. Seeing that he was a small saint, they brought him back to the sect. What happened next was simple. With Fatso Huang's scheming and glib tongue, he successfully entered the Taiyin Sky sect. He went from a small disciple to the current Deacon Huang. The Deacon Huang of the Taiyin Sky sect was neither high nor low. He was considered a powerful figure in the sect. Moreover, Fatso Huang was good at currying favor. He could be said to be doing well in the Taiyin Sky sect. When Fatso Huang gained a foothold in the Taiyin Sky sect, he naturally went to look for Yi Xian and the others. Unfortunately, he did not hear of Yi Xian's name in the entire Beichen star field. Moreover, it was not only Yi Xian who did not hear of him. He did not even have any news of Luo Ho, Yuan Ling and the others. Fortunately, he found Gu Beichen. Gu Beichen did not have such a good opportunity like Fatso Huang. He was seriously injured and had to recuperate alone. Moreover, he cultivated demonic techniques. His murderous demonic aura was regarded as demonic by others. Originally, demonic cultivators were not a big deal. After all, demonic cultivators were everywhere in the Beichen star field. However, Gu Beichen had followed Yi Xian for a long time. Naturally, he was tainted with Yi Xian's murderous and decisive personality. When Gu Beichen recovered from his injuries and wandered around the Beichen starfield, he casually killed a few sect disciples. This caused him to be in big trouble. Chapter 1391. Several major sects joined forces to hunt him down. It could be said that Gu Beichen had nowhere to go. There were several times when he almost died in the hands of these sections. However, Gu Beichen's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. In just 2 million years he stepped into the Great Saint realm. 3 million years later, he stepped into the Saint King realm. Gu Beichen was also very famous. This naturally attracted the attention of some major sections. The Solar Sky Sect master came personally and accepted Gu Beichen as his disciple. He also allowed Gu Beichen to join the Solar Sky Sect. For a time, no one dared to hunt Gu Beichen down. Fatso Huang also found Gu Beichen. The two of them could be considered to have gained a foothold in the Beichen star field. Another 10 million years passed. Gu Beichen had already stepped into the second creation realm. He could be said to be a genius in the Beichen star field. He even became the first spiritual son of the Solar Sky Sect. As Fatso Huang spoke slowly, Yi Xian's mouth curved into a smile. The two of them were still alive and well. This was enough to make Yi Xian feel gratified. After all, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen had been by his side since the beginning of the human world. Until now they had come to the chaotic world. These two were not relatives, but they were better than relatives. Sir, what's your cultivation now? Fatso Huang squinted his eyes and looked at Yi Xian excitedly. Path-querying realm. However, according to my combat strength, no one in the path-querying realm should be able to stop me. Unless someone in the Immortal realm intervenes, I can go anywhere in the Beichen star field, Yi Xian said honestly. Path-querying realm? Fatso Huang's eyes lit up. His face was flushed with excitement. He had vaguely guessed that Yi Xian's cultivation must be very high, but he did not expect it to be so high. One had to know that those ultimate seeds were only at the Yang Birth realm. Perhaps some heaven-defying demons were also at the Dao-querying realm. However, it was impossible for them to have Yi Xian's terrifying battle prowess and cultivation level. Although he had not seen Yi Xian for over 10 million years, Fatso Huang knew Yi Xian well enough to know that those ultimate seeds were nothing compared to Yi Xian. Moreover, a Dao-querying realm cultivator could already establish a mid-tier Dao orthodoxy. In the North Star domain, he was definitely an overlord. The Lunar Sect Master was only a Dao Integration Realm Third Realm, Dao-querying realm cultivator. However, the Lunar Sky Sect was very famous in the entire North Star starfield. Once the Lunar Sect Master reached the Immortal realm, the Lunar Sky Sect would become a top sect in the North Star starfield. Sir, what are your plans? Fatso Huang narrowed his eyes and asked Yi Xian softly. No one knew Fatso Huang better than Yi Xian. Every time Fatso Huang showed this expression, Yi Xian knew that Fatso Huang was definitely up to no good. I have no plans to return to the Grand Central Territory for the time being. When I reach the Immortal Realm, I will naturally return to the Grand Central Territory. Yi Xian had also briefly recounted his experiences. This also allowed Fatso Huang to understand why Yi Xian had come to the North Star starfield. Sir, I have a suggestion. Since you will be staying in the North Star starfield for the time being, you will need a suitable identity. Moreover, you will need a lot of resources for your cultivation. I wonder if you have any thoughts about the position of the Lunar Sect Master? Fatso Huang said sinisterly. Oh, what do you mean? Yi Xian smiled mockingly. He knew that Fatso Huang was up to no good. Sir, the Lunar Sect occupies hundreds of millions of miles of Mount Han. It is considered an overlord in the entire North Star starfield. If you want to cultivate, you will naturally need endless resources. The Lunar Sect is naturally the best choice. Moreover, I have been in the Lunar Sect for so many years. As long as you and I show some tricks, we can completely dominate the Lunar Sect. Moreover, it is not just the Lunar Sect. That kid in the North Star Sect is the first spiritual son of the Solar Sect. The three of us can completely integrate the two sections. Although we may not be able to dominate the North Star starfield, we will definitely be one of the top sects in the North Star starfield. At that time, we will plunder endless resources, which will also allow Sir's cultivation to improve by leaps and bounds. Fatso Huang chattered endlessly, telling Yi Xian all the advantages and disadvantages. His face was filled with excitement throughout. Without Yi Xian by his side, Fatso Huang could be said to be well-behaved, and did not dare to cause trouble. However, Yi Xian's appearance had emboldened him. Your suggestion is not bad. The position of the lunar sect master is indeed a good identity. Moreover, it can also give me a stable cultivation environment. Yi Xian nodded approvingly. However, sir, with your cultivation, can you kill the lunar sect master? He is an existence of the Tao integration realm. He is only one step away from the immortal realm. Moreover, there are many supreme elders in the lunar sect. Rumor has it that 2 of them are existences of the Tao querying realm. I am afraid that this matter. Fatso Huang hesitated. Although his plan was good, in the end, he still needed Yi Xian to act. If Yi Xian could not kill the lunar sect master and the supreme elders, all his plans would be useless. Tao integration realm? Supreme elder? Yi Xian muttered softly. A strange smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. He said, I am not sure if I can kill the lunar sect master of the Tao integration realm. However, there is no harm in trying. Yi Xian was a person who would never do anything that he was not confident of. Although the Tao integration realm was the 3rd realm of the Tao querying realm, and Yi Xian was only at the 1st realm of the Tao querying realm, his combat strength was definitely not as simple as that. Yi Xian did not dare to say whether he could kill the lunar sect master or not. However, he was certain that with his cultivation and combat strength, the other party could not do anything to him. Fatso Huang knew Yi Xian too well. Hearing Yi Xian say this, Fatso Huang's eyes lit up. He was even more delighted. He knew that Yi Xian definitely had a certain level of confidence. Sir, I will have to trouble you a little. When the time comes, what you have to do. Fatso Huang began to talk about his plan. Yi Xian listened with a smile. After half an hour, Fatso Huang and Yi Xian finally decided on a plan. The 2 of them also planned to head to the lunar sect together. However, before that, Yi Xian still had one more thing to do. Naturally, this was Yi Xian Mo. The cold wind whistled and snow fell heavily. A simple tombstone stood at the peak of Mount Han. Yi Xian Mo knelt before the tombstone with a haggard face. He exuded a ruthless aura, as if he had lost the vitality that a human should have. You have knelt for 3 days. It should be enough. Your future is in your own hands. Yi Xian strolled over and stood behind Yi Xian Mo. Given your cultivation, I don't believe that you can't save my mother. Finally, Yi Xian Mo's eyes focused. He slowly rose to his feet and looked back at Yi Xian. You're right. I can save her. However, you have to remember that I don't owe you and your mother anything. If it weren't for me, not only would your mother have died, you would have died too. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have your current cultivation. You wouldn't have been able to turn from a mortal into a saint king. This is a great opportunity that I have bestowed upon you. Therefore you owe me. Yi Xian said ruthlessly. You're right. I do owe you. However, I hate you very much. I hate that you have treated me like a puppet. Yi Xian Mo said in a low voice. The light of extreme demon rippled slightly. Chapter 1392. It doesn't matter if you hate me or resent me. You just have to remember that the strong are like the heavens, and the weak are like dogs. Because you're weak, you can only be manipulated by me. If you don't want to be my puppet, then you have to surpass me. I'll wait for the day when you surpass me. Yi Xian said coldly. Tell me, what do you need me to do? Yi Xian had already grown up. He was no longer the young man of yesterday. The moment he turned into a demon, he had already understood many things. I want you to head to the Grand Central Domain. I want you to join the Extreme Demon Heavenly Palace, until you obtain the Heavenly Heart of Chaos, left behind by the Lord of Extreme Demon, and become the strongest throughout history. Yi Xian said, All right, I still have to thank you for giving me the chance to become the strongest. Yi Xian said sarcastically, The chance is in your hands. When you become the strongest in the future, you just have to do one thing for me, and we'll call it even. Yi Xian said calmly, All right, I promise you. Yi Xian agreed, because he knew that he was powerless against Yi Xian. Moreover, he knew clearly that if he dared to resist, this demon before him would kill him without hesitation. However, with my cultivation I can't cross over. How do I get to the Grand Central Domain? Yi Xian asked. Boom. Time flowed and the sky and space were filled. Yi Xian casually threw out a stream of Milky Way. The terrifying power of time turned into a gate, and one could vaguely see the outline of the Grand Central Domain. After crossing this gate, you'll enter the Grand Central Domain. Go on. Yi Xian waved his sleeves and pushed Yi Xian into the gate. Buzz! The gate closed and Yi Xian disappeared. With Yi Xian's cultivation of the Dao querying realm, and the power of time and space, he could already open up a passageway. From this, one could see that Yi Xian's cultivation had indeed reached a terrifying level. Mister, this kid hates you. If he becomes the strongest in the future, I'm afraid he will become a hidden danger sooner or later. Fatso Huang slowly walked over and reminded. Yi Xian smiled cruelly and said, "It would be good if he obediently listened to me. If he dares to resist in the slightest, I don't mind letting him die without a burial ground. After all, the Lord of the Extreme Devil is his best example." Sir, you're a genius who can control the universe. How can a mere puppet escape from your grasp? Fatso Huang flattered. You rascal. Looking at Fatso Huang's flattering smile, Yi Xian felt a sense of closeness. Although Yi Xian never trusted anyone, Fatso Huang was able to make him trust him. This was because this was a friendship that had been built up along the way. Let's go to the Lunar Sky Sect. Yi Xian called out to Fatso Huang, and the two turned into rays of light and headed north. As for what kind of opportunities Yi Xian would encounter in the Grand Central Territory, and whether he could enter the Extreme Devil Heavenly Palace, it would all depend on his own ability. However, Yi Xian was very confident that Yi Xian would not let him down. He believed that when they met again, Yi Xian would definitely have grown up. The Lunar Sky Sect. It was one of the top forces in the Northern Star Territory. Although it did not have as deep a foundation as the top sects, it occupied hundreds of millions of miles of land, and was revered by many cultivators in the northern region. There were many disciples in the Lunar Sky Sect, and they were spread across the entire northern region. Wherever the people of the sect went, they would be treated as distinguished guests. From this, one could see how vast the influence of the Lunar Sky Sect was. It was not something that small sects could compare with. The Lunar Sky Sect was located in a small area in the north. The vast and endless cold mountains were covered by ice and snow. At a glance, it looked simple and grand, showing the power of a top sect. These thousands of miles of cold mountains were full of yin qi. For the people of the Lunar Sky Sect, this was the most suitable place to cultivate. This was also one of the reasons why the Lunar Sky Sect had a long history. From the outside to the inside of these thousands of miles of cold mountains, from the outer sect cultivators to the sect master, it could be said that there were many layers of selection. The stronger one's cultivation was, the larger the cold mountain they lived in, and the more abundant the yin qi there was. This also explained the cruel law of the northern region. Only the strong were worthy of better cultivation resources, and the weak could only live in places with weak yin qi. A cold light flashed across the sky. Fatso Huang and Yi Xian were flying side by side towards the cold mountain where they lived. As a deacon of the Lunar Sky Sect, Fatso Huang's authority was not great, but it was not small either. However, among the many deacons, he could be said to be the most popular. From his fellow elders to the disciples, Fatso Huang could get along well with everyone. Everyone had a very good impression of him. It could be said that in the entire Lunar Sky Sect, Fatso Huang had to give him some face wherever he went. Snow Bamboo Peak. This was where Fatso Huang cultivated. Snow Bamboo Peak was covered in snow all year round, and contained a great deal of yin qi essence. Even in the central region of the thousands of miles of cold mountains, it was still a treasure ground. There were many trees and snow bamboo on this peak, and under the pressure of the falling snow, it was even more cold and threatening. At the top of Snow Bamboo Peak, there was an abode, a forest of snow bamboo, and a cold pond that emitted an extreme chill. Because it was located at the peak, outside of the forest of snow bamboo was a precipice and a sea of clouds. Cold chi rose, the snow bamboo swayed, and the endless sea of clouds slowly rose. There were even golden koi fish leaping out of the cold pond, causing splashes. Such a scene made one feel as if they were in a sacred realm. "Mister, please." Fatso Huang pushed open the door of the abode, and invited Yi Xian in. Yi Xian looked at Fatso Huang's living environment with some interest, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Your residence is very elegant. It seems that you are living very comfortably in the Lunar Sky sect, Yi Xian said as he stepped into the abode. Fatso Huang also chuckled. They followed Fatso Huang back to the Lunar Sky sect. According to their plan, Fatso Huang would take Yi Xian to see the entry elders tomorrow, and let Yi Xian join the Lunar Sky sect until they found a suitable opportunity to overthrow the entire Lunar Sky sect. In fact, Yi Xian thought that this would be a little troublesome. He could directly kill his way to the sect leader's hall and fight with the Lunar Sky sect leader. After all, violence was the most direct way. However, Fatso Huang dissuaded Yi Xian from this idea. After all, the Lunar Sky sect leader was a path integration stage cultivator who was only a step away from reaching the immortal stage. Moreover, there were a few grand elders around. It was safer to come up with a plan. In the abode, Yi Xian and Fatso Huang were chatting when the sound of rushing air came from afar. Before the person arrived at Snow Bamboo Peak, the voice had already reached Yi Xian and Fatso Huang's ears. Is Deacon Huang back? The voice belonged to a woman, and Yi Xian found it familiar. This was because the person who came was Lin Qing, whom he had almost killed previously. Sir, this woman is the Lunar Sky Sect's Deacon Elder, and one of the Northern Region Alliance's Inspector Heavenly Ambassadors. I stopped you from killing her, because I wanted you to take her for your own use. This will be very useful for us to gain a foothold in the Northern Region, Fatso Huang said quickly. Okay. Yi Xian nodded. He knew Fatso Huang's intentions. The two of them opened the door and walked out. They saw Lin Qing, walking toward Snow Bamboo Peak. Chapter 1393. Cold light shot out from the sky. Lin Qing, expression was cold as she walked toward Snow Bamboo Peak. However, confusion flashed through her eyes from time to time. This was because Fatso Huang had just returned to the Taiyin Sky sect, and the disciples had informed her of the news. Lin Qing, clearly remembered that Fatso Huang had blocked that terrifying path-seeking cultivator in order to save her life. Fatso Huang would have died without a doubt, but how was he able to return safely? Lin Qing, came to Snow Bamboo Peak with great confusion. She wanted to see if Fatso Huang had really returned alive. Greetings, Elder Lin. As Lin Qing, descended on Snow Bamboo Peak, Fatso Huang trotted over to greet her. Yi Xian strolled behind Fatso Huang with a warm smile on his face. It's you. Lin Qing, was surprised to see that Fatso Huang was still alive. However, when she saw Yi Xian appear here, her expression changed drastically. She even took a few steps back. Elder Lin, Mr. Yi and I are best friends. Everything that happened before was a misunderstanding. Fatso Huang hurriedly took out the excuse that he had prepared beforehand. He even made Yi Xian into a good person. However, Lin Qing, was still wary of Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian had casually killed an extreme cultivator. She had almost died at his hands. He said that he wants to join our Taiyin Sky sect. Lin Qing, asked in shock. That's right. Mr. Yi is a path-seeking cultivator. Moreover, we are best friends. If he can join our Taiyin Sky sect, our sect's strength will naturally increase greatly, Fatso Huang said. But he just killed an elder of our Taiyin Sky sect. How do you explain this? Lin Qing, said coldly. Now that she was in the Taiyin Sky sect, Lin Qing, had some confidence, and was not afraid of Yi Xian attacking her. I'll naturally explain this to the sect master. I just hope that Elder Lin can put in a good word for me in front of the sect master. After all, you're the sect master's last disciple. I think it's a good thing for Mr. Yi to join our sect, Fatso Huang said calmly. That's impossible. Although he is a Dao Querying Realm cultivator, he has violated a taboo by killing a member of the Lunar Sky sect. I will report this matter to my master and the Northern Region Alliance. Lin Qing, flatly refused, not because she had any prejudice against Yi Xian, but because Yi Xian always gave her an extremely dangerous feeling. This feeling made her shudder with fear, as if she would be swallowed into Yi Xian's stomach at any moment, and end up without a corpse left. Boom! Lin Qing directly flew into the sky, obviously preparing to leave this place and report this matter to the sect master. After all, Fatso Huang had brought back a terrifying Dao querying realm cultivator. This was no small matter to the Tian Sky sect. This is really troublesome. Without waiting for Lin Qing to leave, Yi Xian frowned slightly. His 5 fingers suddenly reached towards the sky, and Lin Qing was instantly pulled in front of him. His 5 fingers suddenly pressed on Lin Qing's head. Either you die, or you become my servant. If you say another word, I'll send you on your way. The smile on Yi Xian's face disappeared, and turned into an extremely sinister expression. He was not just saying, anyone who disobeyed him would be killed immediately. You? Lin Qing's beautiful face changed drastically, and she was so frightened that she could not speak. This was because she could completely see the cold and cruel killing intent in Yi Xian's eyes. Lin Qing believed that Yi Xian was not trying to intimidate her, because she had experienced Yi Xian's cruel methods before. What do you want? Lin Qing trembled as she spoke, because there was no way she would become Yi Xian's servant. You talk too much. I'll send you on your way. Yi Xian did not have time to waste on this woman. His 5 fingers suddenly shook, and a world shaking might spread out. Clearly, he was going to kill her in the next moment. But before Yi Xian could act, an extremely terrifying qi came from the center of Mount Han, and a deep voice resounded in the world. Fellow Taoist, your cultivation is Tongtian. Today, you have graced my sect with your presence. I wonder how my disciple has offended you, to actually anger you? As this voice rang out, Yi Xian's expression did not change. Instead, a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he casually threw Lin Qing to the ground. I've heard that the lunar sect master's cultivation is Tongtian, only a step away from the immortal realm. I've traveled the 5 regions of chaos for a long time, and I've always liked to make friends. I wonder if the sect master is willing to make friends with me? Yi Xian said indifferently, but his voice resounded throughout the lunar sect. Sir, you? Fatso Huang was suddenly shocked, because according to the plan they had set, he would be the one to recommend Yi Xian to the lunar sect. But now, what Yi Xian had done had already deviated from his plan. Actually, Yi Xian could not be blamed for not acting according to the plan, because he realized that if he followed Fatso Huang's plan, it would take too much time. As the saying went, the strong had to stand tall and show their unparalleled might. Yi Xian was in the Dao querying realm, and his battle strength was even more terrifying. He could completely face the lunar sect master directly, and perhaps this was the simplest and most direct method. I've always liked to make friends. Fellow Taoist, you're a guest from afar, so please come to the palace for a chat. Rumble. The lunar sect master's voice resounded through the world, and a cold light flashed across the sky. This also made Yi Xian smile slightly, and he directly called Fatso Huang to step onto the flashing bridge, and the 2 of them strolled towards the lunar temple. Despicable guy. Watching Yi Xian and Fatso Huang disappear into the distance, Lin Qing's pale face was filled with fear. If not for the lunar sect master, she really felt that Yi Xian would have killed her. Lunar temple. The cold mountain towered into the sky, and a vast ice palace stood at the peak of the cold mountain. From afar, it gave off a solemn feeling. As Yi Xian and Fatso Huang stood outside the lunar temple, the stone door of the lunar temple rumbled open. Yi Xian smiled slightly and walked into the lunar temple. As the saying went, one would not take on a porcelain job without a diamond. Although Yi Xian had just entered the Dao querying realm, he had experienced the most powerful battle in history, and he had confidence that others did not have. Even if the lunar sect master was a Dao querying realm figure, Yi Xian was not afraid at all. After all, his battle strength could not be underestimated by ordinary Dao querying realm cultivators. Although he could not use the future transformation technique, he still had the attack character formula and the tribulation transcender transformation. These 2 forbidden secret techniques were enough for him to not be afraid of the lunar sect master. Fellow Taoist, your presence brings light to the lunar sky sect. As soon as Yi Xian entered the main hall, he saw a young man in white leading a dozen people to welcome him. This white-robed man had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He looked to be about the same age as Yi Xian, but his eyes were slightly older and more ancient. It was obvious that he had lived for countless years. Obviously, this white-robed man was the lunar sect master. However, he did not reveal any power at this moment. Instead, he had a smile on his face as he welcomed Yi Xian. The people following him were obviously elders. Sect master is too polite. Yi Xian returned the greeting with a smile. Fellow Taoists, please take a seat. The lunar sect master smiled, but his eyes flickered slightly as he looked at Yi Xian. In fact, he was also observing Yi Xian's cultivation. Dao querying realm? Hiss. The lunar sect master's heart suddenly trembled, although he could see that Yi Xian's cultivation was at the Dao querying realm, which was 2 small realms lower than him. For some reason, when he first saw Yi Xian, he actually felt a sense of danger. This person was not simple. With just one look, the lunar sect master made a judgment. Yi Xian was definitely not an ordinary Dao querying realm cultivator. Otherwise, with his Dao integration realm cultivation, he would not be afraid. At the lunar sect master's cultivation level, his intuition for danger was extremely sharp. Moreover, when he met Yi Xian's eyes, the lunar sect master's heart trembled violently. What kind of eyes were these? They looked as calm as water without ripples. Occasionally, a flash of light would flash across his eyes, as if they were filled with extreme terror. This was no longer a simple kind of power, but a look that only a peerless vicious person, who had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood, could have. The lunar sect master was very polite. He was so polite that he put down the airs of a Dao integration realm cultivator. He also lowered his own status, because he did not want to fight with an unpredictable vicious person. Whether he could suppress Yi Xian or not, he would definitely have to pay a huge price. Chapter 1394. The lunar sect master wasn't the only one observing Yi Xian. Yi Xian was also observing the lunar sect master. This was because Yi Xian had never met a Dao integration realm cultivator before. He didn't know how big the gap was between him and a Dao integration realm cultivator. However, when Yi Xian saw the lunar sect master for the first time, a smile appeared on his face. This was because the lunar sect master in front of him didn't give him too much pressure. Yi Xian's intuition told him that the lunar sect master was definitely not much stronger than him. If he went all out, there was a high chance that he could suppress the lunar sect master. This was a kind of instinct and intuition. It was like a tiger meeting a lamb. Even if both sides didn't know what species the other was, the suppression of their bloodlines would give people the most intuitive feeling. Although Yi Xian was already confident, he still appeared gentle. This was because there were several supreme elders following the lunar sect master. Some of them were in the Dao comprehending realm, while others were in the Dao querying realm. Their combined combat strength was still not something that Yi Xian could underestimate. Soon, under the lunar sect master's invitation, Yi Xian sat in the guest seat. In an instant, the atmosphere in the entire lunar temple became heavy. May I know where the sacred mountain is? What business do you have with my lunar sky sect? The lunar sect master smiled kindly. I'm Yi Tian. I'm a rogue cultivator who likes to travel the 5 regions of chaos. Deacon Huang is coincidentally an old friend of mine. Yi Xian casually made up a lie to evade the lunar sect master. It could be considered as a simple explanation of his identity. However, no one present was a fool. Although Fatso Huang was a good person in the lunar sky sect, his cultivation had just stepped into the great sage realm. How could someone like him befriend someone like Yi Xian? Therefore, no one present believed Yi Xian's words. Instead, a trace of caution flashed through their eyes as they looked at him. Regardless of whether it was the lunar sect master or the supreme elders present, they were all people who had seen the world. They had seen many so-called strong cultivators, and Yi Xian just so happened to have the attitude of a strong cultivator. They had no choice but to treat him seriously. Although Yi Xian's aura was only at the Dao querying realm, the lunar moon sect master believed in her intuition and judgment. This black-robed man before her was definitely not simple. Fatso Huang bowed and said, Sect Master, Mr. Yi and I are old friends. He likes to travel around the 5 regions. Today we are very happy to meet again. Mr. Yi also wants to join our Grand Een Sky sect. I hope that the sect master will agree. The lunar sect master was clearly stunned. She did not expect Fatso Huang to make such a request. A Dao querying realm cultivator, joining the lunar sky sect was indeed a joyous occasion. However, Yi Xian's origins were unclear. Moreover, he always gave off a dangerous aura. The lunar sect master instinctively felt that something was wrong. Moreover, Yi Xian had almost killed Lin Qing just now. From this, she could tell that he was not a kind person. Of course, Yi Xian was not a kind person. However, the lunar sky sect was not a kind person either. From the sect master to the disciples, everyone could be said to be decisive in killing. After all, in the entire North Star domain, there was killing everywhere. Those with a kind heart could not survive in the North Star domain. However, the lunar sect master really did not intend to take Yi Xian in. Deacon Huang, you are too reckless. Yi Daoyu is a Dao querying realm cultivator. He already has the qualifications to establish a sect. How can our lunar sky sect, a small pond, wrong such a Tongtian character? The lunar sect master was slightly harsh. In fact, she was also rejecting Yi Xian from joining the lunar sky sect. Sect master, you must be joking. I am tired of traveling around the 5 regions. I am looking for a cultivation holy land to improve my cultivation. If the sect master does not mind, I am naturally willing to join your sect. Yi Xian smiled and said, "This?" The lunar sect master frowned. She did not expect Yi Xian to personally ask. She did not know how to refuse. What? Is the sect master not willing? Or do you look down on me? The smile on Yi Xian's face gradually disappeared. His eyes narrowed slightly. There was a faint threat in his words. Yi Xian's attitude immediately caused the faces of the supreme elders to turn cold. They were already dissatisfied with Yi Xian. They also did not understand why the lunar sect master tolerated Yi Xian. Now that Yi Xian was boasting shamelessly and even threatening them, they immediately looked at Yi Xian with great hostility. Master, we can't let this great demon join our sect. Suddenly a cold light shot in. Lin Qing instantly appeared in the main hall. She looked coldly at Yi Xian. Qing, don't be rude. The lunar sect master frowned slightly. Although she did not like Yi Xian, calling him a great demon was a taboo. This was because the title of great demon was in existence that everyone in the North Star domain wanted to kill. Master, listen to me. Lin Qing quickly recounted the massacre in Glacier City. She also told her master that Yi Xian had killed the sect's elder. The atmosphere in the main hall gradually turned cold. Yi Daoyu, is what my disciple said true? The lunar sect master's face gradually turned gloomy. The aura of the Dao integration realm faintly leaked out. If everything Lin Qing said was true, she could not let Yi Xian join the lunar sect. Instead, she would have to ask Yi Xian for an explanation. Glacier City was under the jurisdiction of the lunar sect. The massacre of the entire city was a slap to the lunar sect's face. Moreover, Yi Xian had killed their elder. This was a provocation to the lunar sect. If they let Yi Xian go easily or pretended that nothing had happened, the lunar sect would become the laughingstock of the North Star domain. Looking at the lunar sect master's gloomy face and the murderous eyes of the many grand elders, Yi Xian was as calm as a mountain. Instead, his lips curled into a deep smile. What she said is true, but so what? Yi Xian said calmly. However, Fatso Huang behind him secretly broke out in cold sweat. Fatso Huang was deeply afraid that a great battle would break out. No matter how strong Yi Xian was, he was up against an entire sect. Moreover, the lunar sect master was in the Dao integration realm, only a step away from the immortal realm. Even if Yi Xian could resist the lunar sect master, the other grand elders were not to be trifled with. Fortunately, Fatso Huang was not flustered in the face of danger. Even though he was extremely nervous, he had a kind of paranoid trust in Yi Xian. He believed that since Yi Xian dared to come here, he must have his own confidence. Yi Daoyu, I've treated you as a guest, but you've protected a demon and killed my sect elder. Isn't this a bit unreasonable? Or do you think nothing of the lunar sect at all? The lunar sect master was not a pushover. If he were to treat Yi Xian kindly at this moment, how could he maintain the dignity of a sect master? Boom! The lunar sect master slammed the table and stood up. The table in front of him was reduced to dust. The terrifying aura of the Tao integration realm leaked out, and the entire lunar divine mountain shook violently at this moment. Chapter 1395. Ha ha ha. In the face of the lunar sect master's might, Yi Xian laughed loudly and said, Sect Master Su Wen is only one step away from attaining the immortal realm. Today, I would also like to experience the sect master's cultivation. Boom! Yi Xian slowly stood up, and the sky-burying technique was activated. A gray light burst out, making Yi Xian's entire being become deep and mysterious. A silent terror filled the entire great hall. Good. I would also like to experience your techniques. In this world, there was only the strong and the weak. There was no right or wrong. The so-called reason was only in the hands of the strong. At this moment, there was no need for the two of them to argue about who was right and who was wrong. Only a battle could truly resolve the current situation. Boom! The lunar sect master's cold light filled the sky, and 100 million miles of the world was covered in snow. He was a path integration realm cultivator, only one step away from attaining the immortal realm and becoming a sect master. Such a strong cultivator was naturally not afraid of a battle. Even if Yi Xian gave him a very dangerous feeling, his heart of a strong cultivator made him want to see what abilities Yi Xian had to dare to come to the lunar sky sect alone, to behave so atrociously. Chi! The lunar sect master took a step forward and stood directly in the sky. Clearly, he wanted to fight Yi Xian in the sky dome. This was also a display of his might as a sect master. Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward and also appeared in the sky dome. He looked calmly at the lunar sect master, and a fiery light flashed in his eyes. Ever since the battle of the strongest of all ages, Yi Xian had been in a deep slumber for millions of years. Ever since he woke up, he had never truly battled with anyone. He also wanted to know how big the gap was between him and the lunar sect master, who was a path integration realm cultivator. Lunar 9 severed fingers. The lunar sect master did not waste any time. A pair of sword fingers cut through the sky, and the aura of a path integration realm cultivator exploded. The cold mountains within 100 million miles rumbled and shook. His entire person actually turned into 9 figures, and instantly charged toward Yi Xian. Interesting. Yi Xian's eyes lit up, because the lunar sect master was actually giving him a lot of pressure. This kind of pressure made him extremely excited, as if he had found a worthy opponent. Very. A simple word came out from Yi Xian's mouth. He pointed a finger at the sky, and the vast sky rumbled as a gigantic finger condensed. Rumble. Transcendence heaven and earth. All things sink into oblivion. This heavenly giant finger was a world-shaking technique that Yi Xian had unleashed. Its scale was 100,000 kilometers wide, and it was like a pillar of heaven and earth that could suppress mountains and rivers. It brought with it a terrifying and mighty force that could obliterate all things as it smashed towards the lunar sect master. The lunar sect master's expression changed drastically. Although he did not underestimate Yi Xian, he did not expect Yi Xian to be so terrifying. His opponent's world-shaking great art actually gave him a lot of pressure. If he were to face this attack head-on, he would also be severely injured. Intercept. The 9 illusions of the lunar sect master overlapped. He also pointed a finger at the sky, and the world within 100,000 kilometers began to gradually freeze. The terrifying cold current seemed to freeze everything. It had to be said that as a Tao integration realm existence, the lunar sect master was indeed extremely powerful. When he unleashed this great cold sky technique, he fully displayed the terrifying power of a Tao integration realm existence. If it were any other Tao querying cultivator, no one would be able to withstand this attack from the lunar sect master. Unfortunately, he had encountered a freak like Yi Xian, who could not be judged based on cultivation level. Rumble. The heavenly giant finger descended, and the world within 100,000 kilometers exploded inch by inch. The great art that the lunar sect master had unleashed collapsed, and it could not stop Yi Xian's world-shaking attack at all. It was not that the lunar sect master was too weak, but that Yi Xian was too strong. Although he was only a Dao querying cultivator, his battle prowess was definitely comparable to a Dao integration realm cultivation level. The attack character formula, Calamity Transcendent Transformation, Heaven Burial Technique, and he was also proficient in various powerful techniques. When these were combined, how could the lunar sect master possibly have the upper hand? The lunar sect master's expression was solemn, as a heavenly sword appeared in his hand. The heavenly sword had a terrifying aura, and it was obviously a chaos divine weapon. As he slashed out with the sword, it destroyed Yi Xian's heavenly giant finger. Although Yi Xian was very strong, the lunar sect master was not weak either. As a Dao integration realm expert, he was not a pushover. Kill. The lunar sect master's expression was extremely solemn. He had already regarded Yi Xian as a peerless enemy. At this moment, he had fully unleashed his cultivation level, and his entire person had merged with heaven and earth. With unimaginable killing intent, he attacked Yi Xian. What was the Dao integration realm? Merging with heaven, earth, and man. This was the so-called Dao integration realm. Heaven, earth, and man merged into one. And it was also the opportunity to step into the immortal realm. Although the lunar sect master had not stepped into the immortal realm, the power that erupted from the merging of heaven, earth, and man was something that even Yi Xian did not dare to underestimate. Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Yi Xian roared, and his aura suddenly skyrocketed. In an instant, his aura was not weaker than that of the lunar sect master. He also charged toward the lunar sect master. The terrifying heaven-burying light shook heaven and earth, and it also carried an aura that could bury all things. At a glance, one's heart palpitated. Bang! 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 The two peerless experts instantly clashed, and in an instant, the heaven and earth within hundreds of millions of miles shook violently. Streaks of heavenly clouds were vaporized into smoke, and the occasional aftershock that shot out shattered the cold mountains into ashes. Terrifying, too terrifying. This was an extremely powerful battle below the immortal realm. The power that erupted from it could not be said to be earth-shattering, but it could definitely be said to be rare in the world. At this moment, everyone in the lunar sect was watching this battle. Fatso Huang kept rubbing his hands as he watched nervously. However, no one knew what the outcome of this battle would be. Rumble! The heaven and earth exploded, and the cold mountains were turned into ashes. The sky was cracked for thousands of miles. This battle lasted for a full 3 days and 3 nights. Then, a deafening explosion sounded, and the two figures landed on the peak of the lunar mountain at the same time. Ha ha ha, Yi Daoyou's cultivation is good. I admire you very much. The lunar sect master laughed wildly, and cupped his hands toward Yi Xian. There was no longer any coldness on his face. It was as if there was an extremely warm expression on his face. Sect master's cultivation is Tongtian. It is indeed an eye-opener for me. Yi Xian returned the gesture with a smile. Since fellow Yi wants to join our lunar heavenly sect, our sect will naturally welcome you. With fellow Yi joining us, our lunar heavenly sect will become even more powerful. The lunar heavenly sect master said with a coarse laugh. Thank you for your help, sect master. Yi Xian cupped his hands and bowed. 3 days later, we will hold an entrance ceremony for you. In the future, Yi Daoyu will be the vice sect master of our lunar sect. The lunar sect master said with a smile. Master He, shut up. Is this the place for you to speak? Without waiting for Lin Qing, to dissuade him, the lunar sect master's face turned cold as he scolded him fiercely. This caused Lin Qing, face to change, and she could only swallow the words in her mouth. Deacon Huang, since Yi Daoyu and you are old friends, he will stay at your snow bamboo peak for the next 3 days. After 3 days, Yi Daoyu will join our sect, and we will find another blessed land for him. The lunar sect master looked at Fatso Huang with a smile. Yes, sect master. Fatso Huang quickly bowed. Yi Xian and the lunar sect master bade each other farewell. Under the gaze of the lunar sect master, Yi Xian and Fatso Huang turned into beams of light and left. Seeing Yi Xian and Fatso Huang disappear, Lin Qing looked at the lunar sect master with a confused expression. Master, why did you let him go? He killed. Wah. Suddenly, without waiting for Lin Qing to finish, the lunar sect master's rosy and smiling face turned pale. She spat out a mouthful of blood and staggered back 3 steps. Master? Sect master? Lin Qing and the other grand elders' faces changed drastically. They were stunned on the spot, unable to believe what they had just seen. Yi Tian, what a Dao querying realm monster! Who the hell is he? The lunar sect master wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her face was extremely solemn, and when she opened and closed her eyes, they flashed with extreme fear. Chapter 1396. Snow Bamboo Peak. Yi Xian stood proudly at the peak of Mount Han, as he looked down at the sea of clouds in front of him. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well, and his thoughts were slightly erratic. The 3 Dao querying realms were a process of comprehending the world of chaos and unearthing one's own potential. The Dao querying realm was to comprehend the world of chaos, touch the laws of chaos, and seek one's own truth. The Dao comprehending realm was to understand the essence of oneself and improve the power of one's divine soul, gradually molding it to perfection. The Dao integration realm was to merge with the heavens, merge with the earth, merge with the heavens, merge with the earth, and merge with the heavens. Only then would one have a chance to step into the immortal realm. Yi Xian was thinking about his future path. The heaven-burying art he created had already completed its initial prototype, and all that was left was to constantly perfect it until it reached perfection. However, Yi Xian now encountered a problem. The 3 Dao querying realms focused on the spiritual realm, and the power of the chaotic universe was used for one's own use. Yi Xian was different. He cultivated his own body and did not have a deep understanding of the chaotic universe. Even when he crossed the Great Sage Tribulation, he chose to break through all laws. How do I step into the Dao comprehending realm? Yi Xian muttered to himself. At this moment, this problem had become a knot in his heart. If he just blindly devoured cultivation, it would only increase his combat strength. What he wanted was to perfect his divine soul and improve his realm. The extreme of heaven and earth, the beginning of all laws. Where do laws come from, and where does the Dao come from? Yi Xian looked up at the sky and whispered, his whole person falling into thought. He needed a kind of epiphany, one that could help him break into the Dao comprehending realm. An ancient legend. There was once a heaven-defying genius who had a sudden epiphany and directly entered the Dao integration realm from the Dao querying realm. There was also a genius who comprehended the mysteries of chaos and directly entered the immortal realm. The 3 Dao querying realms did not focus on the growth of one's cultivation base, but on the understanding of the chaotic universe. A person was like a miniature chaotic universe, with endless mysteries hidden within. This was also a process of discovering oneself. As for how Yi Xian discovered himself, it depended on himself. This was not something external forces could help him with. One's cultivation could be boosted by resources, or devoured with tribulation transcender techniques. However, Yi Xian could only rely on himself to increase his spiritual power. Sir, what are you thinking about? Fatso Huang silently appeared behind Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian in confusion, because Yi Xian had been standing there for an entire day and night. I'm thinking about what it means to comprehend the Dao, what it means to unite the Dao. Yi Xian turned around and smiled at Fatso Huang. With Mister's talent, a mere Dao querying realm 3 realms is nothing difficult. It's just that the opportunity hasn't arrived yet. I believe that you will definitely be able to break through the Dao querying realm 3 realms very quickly and become an immortal sect master level existence, Fatso Huang said with certainty. Even though you like to flatter me, you're still speaking from the bottom of your heart, Yi Xian scolded jokingly. Mister, you have the ability of a Tongtian. How could I, Fatso Huang, be flattering you, ha ha ha. Fatso Huang laughed out loud. However, mister, I have a question. Why did the Lunar Sect Master suddenly change his mind and let you join the Lunar Sky Sect? What was the outcome of that battle between you and him? Fatso Huang finally asked the question in his heart. What was the outcome? Yi Xian whispered. He looked at the flying snow in the sky, and the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. Then, he looked at Fatso Huang and said, he is very strong, and is indeed a character that cannot be underestimated. However, if we were to fight to the death, I am confident that I can kill him. This is also the reason why he gave in to me. Fatso Huang was shocked. He looked at Yi Xian in surprise and said, Mister, do you mean that he was defeated by you in this battle? It can't be considered a defeat. After all, it wasn't a fight to the death. However, he was hit by my great art of chaos. He should be recuperating now, Yi Xian said indifferently. I see. Fatso Huang nodded slowly. He finally knew why the Lunar Sect Master gave in. It turned out that the Lunar Sect Master was injured in the battle just now. This was the real reason. However, mister, there is something that I don't understand. Since you can suppress the Lunar Sect Master, why didn't you kill him just now? Even those Supreme Elders, if you used some trump cards, it wouldn't be difficult for you to kill all of them, right? Fatso Huang said, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. I don't care about the Lunar Sect. This is just a temporary foothold for you and me. After all, I only want to break through to the Immortal realm. Even if I take over the Lunar Sect, it won't do us much good. Why don't we let the Lunar Sect Master be a puppet? You and I just need to control him from behind the scenes. Moreover, although the Northern Star region is not as big as the Grand Central region, there are still some great sects stationed here. Their sect masters are all at the Immortal realm. If I am too conspicuous, I will definitely attract the attention of these Immortal realm sect masters. This is not the result that I want to see. Yi Xian explained slowly. He was also explaining the reason for Fatso Huang's decision. Mister, you are wise. I am too utilitarian. Fatso Huang bowed and continued. However, mister, there is one thing that you should pay attention to. There is a Northern Region Alliance in the Northern Star region. This Northern Region Alliance is considered a great force in the Northern Star region. It is also composed of many orthodoxies. There is no lack of Immortal Realm experts among them. They are strong enough to compete with the great sects in the Northern region. Northern Region Alliance. This was not the first time Yi Xian heard this name. Previously, Fatso Huang mentioned that Lin Qing was the Inspector Heavenly Ambassador of the Northern Region Alliance. Clearly, this Northern Region Alliance was not simple. The Northern Region Alliance does not have a fixed membership. However, the members are all from different orthodoxies. Even the great sects have to be wary of them. Fatso Huang explained slowly. Clearly, there were great sects in the Northern region. For example, the Lunar Sect was only a mid-tier sect. They did not have any Immortal Realm experts. They could be swallowed up by these great sects at any time. Not only the Lunar Sect, but other sects were also in the same situation. Therefore, the Northern Region Alliance was born. Many orthodoxies and sects united together. This way, they could have an equal dialogue with the great sects in the Northern region and fight for their rightful rights. According to Fatso Huang's introduction, the current leader of the Northern Region Alliance was the Master of the Ether Sect. This person had just stepped into the Immortal Realm a million years ago. He also took over the position of the leader of the Northern Region Alliance. People like the Master of the Lunar Sect were all elders of the Northern Region Alliance. Although many sects formed the Northern Region Alliance, each sect had their own selfish motives. The Northern Region Alliance was not an iron bucket. There were many internal disputes. However, when faced with the threat of the great sects, the disputes in the Northern Region Alliance would disappear. They would work together to fight against the great sects in the Northern region. Mister, if you can step into the Immortal Realm and control the Northern Region Alliance, you can use the Northern Region Alliance as a starting point to sweep across the Northern Star region and suppress all the great sections. By then, you will be the king of the Northern region. With the power of one region, you can sweep across the chaotic world. The more Fatso Huang spoke, the more excited he became. His eyes were shining. Chapter 1397. Power is fleeting. You're too naive. Before Fatso Huang could finish, Yi Xian interrupted him. His eyes were deep as he rejected Fatso Huang's idea. Mr. Yu? Fatso Huang was clearly stunned. He didn't understand the meaning behind Yi Xian's words. In the chaotic universe in the 12 periods, power is fleeting. There are only eternal experts, and no eternal great sections. If I were comparable to an ultimate expert, I would be a sect by myself. I could destroy any power with a flick of my finger. The so-called orthodoxy and great sects are nothing but a joke in the eyes of an ultimate expert. Ever since he'd experienced the battle with the strongest of all times, and found out about the existence of taboo characters, Yi Xian's horizons were no longer limited to the so-called powers. He deeply understood that no matter how powerful a power was, it was nothing more than paper in front of the strongest of all times. But you're right. Although I don't want to be the king of the northern region, if I can control the entire northern region, it would be beneficial for me. Yi Xian's tone changed. Although Yi Xian didn't want to create any power, being able to control a region was still a good thing for him. However, right now his focus was on how to break through to the immortal realm. As for this matter, it was just a matter of convenience. Don't worry, mister. You only need to hold the fort behind the scenes. Leave the rest to me. I've already sent a message to Beichen. I believe it won't be long before he comes to see you. Fatso Huang said. Okay. Yi Xian nodded slowly, and looked at the sea of clouds in front of him again. Fatso Huang also silently took his leave. He knew that Yi Xian was comprehending himself, and looking for an opportunity to break through his cultivation base. 3 days later, in the lunar temple, the ancient bell continued to echo endlessly. In the lunar temple, the lunar sect master and the 4 supreme elders held an entrance ceremony for Yi Xian. It was a little strange that no disciples came to observe Yi Xian's entrance ceremony. Only Fatso Huang and Lin Qing were present. It was indeed a little shabby. After all, Yi Xian had joined the Lunar Sky Sect and become the vice sect master. This was a big deal for the Lunar Sky Sect. They should have sent out invitations to everyone to observe the ceremony. However, the Lunar Sect Master didn't do so. She just went through the formalities, and Yi Xian officially joined the Lunar Sky Sect. However, Yi Xian didn't mind, because he knew very well that the Lunar Sect Master was only trying to appease him. Letting him join the Lunar Sky Sect was something he was forced to do. The entrance ceremony quickly ended. The Lunar Sect Master handed a jade tablet to Yi Xian with a smile and said, Fellow Yi, this is the Vice Sect Master's token. From now on, you are the Vice Sect Master of my Lunar Sky Sect. If you need anything, you can instruct Deacon Huang to do it. You can cultivate in my Lunar Sky Sect at ease. Thank you, Sect Master. Yi Xian humbly received the command token. From beginning to end, his expression was extremely calm. This also caused the Lunar Sect Master and the 4 supreme elders to hold their breaths. Fear clearly flashed through their eyes. Yi Xian was obviously an unstable factor. They weren't sure what his purpose was in coming to the Lunar Sky Sect. However, the Alliance Grand Banquet was about to be held in the Lunar Sky Sect. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Yi Daoyu, logically speaking, with your cultivation, we should send out invitations to everyone to join our sect. Today's entrance ceremony is indeed a little shabby. However, the Alliance Grand Banquet is in 10 years. This year's Alliance Grand Banquet will be held in the Lunar Sky Sect. So we can only inconvenience you. The Lunar Sect Master pretended to be helpless. We cultivators don't care about the red tape. Sect Master, you don't have to blame yourself. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Well, Yi Daoyu is indeed a straightforward person. Then I won't keep you. If you need anything, you can send someone to inform me. The Lunar Sect Master said. Thank you, Sect Master. Yi Xian cupped his hands and bowed. He didn't stay, and left the Lunar Temple with Fatso Huang. Seeing that Yi Xian and Fatso Huang had left, Lin Qing bowed to the Lunar Sect Master and said, Master, according to your instructions, I have investigated Yi Tian's background. I couldn't find any clues. Yi Tian is definitely not his real name. However, I have already expected this. Have you informed the sect leader of the ether? The lunar sect master asked in a deep voice. Master, I have already informed the sect leader of the ether according to your instructions. He asked me to tell you that in the Alliance Grand Banquet 10 years later, as long as you fulfill your promise to him, he will naturally help you to deal with Yi Tian. Lin Qing bowed and said, he is indeed an ambitious person. However, this old bastard ether won't be proud for long. When I step into the immortal realm, he will no longer be qualified to threaten the lunar sky sect. The lunar sect master said in a cold voice. Sect master, with the help of the sect leader of the ether, Yi Tian will definitely die. This is a plan to kill two birds with one stone. A supreme elder complimented. This Yi Tian's identity is mysterious and his combat strength is terrifying. Now that I am at the critical moment of stepping into the immortal realm, I can only give in to him. Using the old bastard ether to kill him is the best choice now. The lunar sect master sneered. However, sect master, in the Alliance Grand Banquet 10 years later, the lunar sky sect will give up so many benefits just to kill Yi Tian. Isn't it a little too unworthy? Another supreme elder frowned and said, What do you know? Sect master is about to step into the immortal realm. Giving up the benefits now may seem harmful to our sect, but once you step into the immortal realm, we will get back the benefits we lost tenfold. At that time, our lunar sky sect can change its name to the lunar sect. Another supreme elder said, There's no need for all of you to be anxious. In the future, my lunar sect will definitely flourish in my hands. Regardless of whether it's that old bastard heaven or this Yi Tian, they're all mere ants beneath my feet. The lunar sect master was brimming with ambition, and a cold killing intent occasionally flashed through her eyes. Unfortunately, the lunar sect master did not know that the conversation between him and the supreme elders had been heard by Yi Xian. This made Yi Xian, who was far away in the sky, smile contemptuously. Initially, I didn't want to kill you so soon. Since you want to die, I can only fulfill your wish. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Then he brought Fatso Huang back to the snow bamboo peak. Although Yi Xian's cultivation was in the Dao querying realm, his abilities were definitely higher than the lunar sect master's. He had dabbled in many supreme skills. Listening to sounds from afar was a piece of cake for him. The lunar sect master would never have thought that everything he said and the plan was under Yi Xian's control. The pitiful lunar sect master was still dreaming of stepping into the immortal realm. However, he would never have thought that the opportunity to kill Yi Xian would bring about such a huge disaster for himself. Originally, Yi Xian did not want to kill him. He only wanted to make him a puppet. Yi Xian could hide behind the scenes. However, Yi Xian had changed his mind. This was because Yi Xian was an extremely vicious and cruel person. No matter who wanted him dead, Yi Xian would definitely kill them. This was also his principle. Chapter 1398. It was a cold and snowy day, and everything was silent. The entire snow bamboo peak was covered in snow. Yi Xian meditated in front of the sea of clouds every day. These days, he felt something in his heart, as if he had found an opportunity to enter the Tao comprehending state. The three realms of Tao seeking were the most miraculous realms. Because everyone was an individual, the things they comprehended were also different. The insights of others couldn't help Yi Xian, so he needed to comprehend his own things. This was the key to stepping into the Tao comprehending realm. The so-called opportunity could be a blade of grass or a grain of sand. It could also be the vast universe. It could even be an epiphany between life and death. This kind of opportunity could not be described in detail. It depended on the person. Some cultivators meditated for thousands of years and could only stay in the Tao querying state for the rest of their lives. There were also some who entered the Tao comprehending state in one day. There were even some who could enter the Tao comprehending state. Yi Xian believed that he had an invincible heart, as well as great courage and perseverance. Even if his physique was only a mortal body, he definitely wouldn't be inferior to those so-called battle physiques on the path of cultivation. Unfortunately, Yi Xian helplessly found that he was not one of those people who could reach the peak of the 3 states of Tao querying in one day. At this moment, he only had a little clue about the Tao comprehending state. Time passed quickly. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian woke up from his thoughts. Fatso Huang had been standing behind him for a long time. Sir, there are only 7 years left before the Grand Assembly of the Alliance starts in the lunar sect. Don't you need to prepare? Fatso Huang reminded him. Entering the Tao querying state and meditating on my own body is my preparation. Yi Xian said lightly. The so-called preparation was just to strengthen himself. If he could enter the Tao comprehending state, his combat power would improve further. According to the lunar sect master, the master of the sect of Ether was in the immortal state and also the leader of the Northern Region Alliance. However, he had just entered the immortal state, compared to the sect master of Butian, who had been in the immortal state for a long time. He was worlds apart. According to Yi Xian's estimation, since he was able to suppress the lunar master, a path reunion cultivator, in the Tao querying realm, he might be able to fight with the master of the sect of Ether, who had just entered the immortal realm, when he entered the Tao comprehending realm. However, this was just Yi Xian's speculation. He was not sure whether he could defeat the master of the sect of the Ether. Although there was only a small gap between the immortal realm and the convergence realm, the gap between the 2 realms was not that simple. Immortal Sect Master. From this title, one could tell how terrifyingly powerful the immortal realm was. The gap between them was absolutely terrifying. However, Yi Xian really wanted to give it a try. When he stepped into the Tao comprehending realm, he could fight against an early immortal realm expert. If he could remain undefeated, it would give him a new definition of his combat strength. Sir, what are you thinking about? Looking at Yi Xian deep in thought, Fatso Huang probed. Fatso Huang, are you willing to practice my cultivation method? Yi Xian raised his eyes and looked at Fatso Huang. His expression became serious. This also startled Fatso Huang. He quickly nodded and said, Sir, of course, it's not an ordinary method. Of course, I'm willing to learn it. In fact, Yi Xian felt a little ashamed of Fatso Huang. Fatso Huang had been following him for a long time, and had always been loyal to him. However, Yi Xian was only in the Great Sage realm now. This made Yi Xian want to help Fatso Huang. This method is called the Sky Burying Skill. It's a method that I created. This method incorporates the omnipotent methods. It's very difficult to practice. However, if you can successfully practice it, you'll be invincible in the same realm. It's not impossible for you to fight against those in a higher realm. Yi Xian said solemnly. He wasn't bragging. Although the Sky Burying Skill had just been established and wasn't perfect, it had already begun to take shape. The power contained in it wouldn't be inferior to the omnipotent methods. Thank you very much for your generous gift, sir. Fatso Huang's face lit up with joy. He had been stuck in the Great Sage realm. He hadn't made the slightest progress for so many years. He knew that his aptitude wasn't good. However, Fatso Huang also wanted to strengthen himself. In fact, it's the best choice for me to teach you the omnipotent methods. After all, this is a cultivation method created by the omnipotent methods since ancient times. It's already in the process of perfection. However, I've decided to teach you the Sky Burying Skill in order to avoid too much involvement between you and them. Moreover, I believe that this method will surpass the omnipotent methods in the future. Yi Xian said solemnly. He pointed his finger at Fatso Huang and poured the Sky Burying Skill he created into Fatso Huang's Saint Soul. This was the first time Yi Xian had taught the Sky Burying Skill to an outsider. Fatso Huang had followed him for so many years. If it were someone else, Yi Xian would never have rashly taught them the Sky Burying Skill. Wang. Yi Xian waved his hand, and a large number of saint pills and spirit essences piled up like a mountain. They directly erupted with bright light, causing the spirit chi of the entire snow bamboo peak to become as thick as water. I originally wanted to teach you the Calamity Transcenda method. If you have this method in hand, you can devour the cultivation of others. However, I have an agreement with the heaven-devouring demon lord that the Calamity Transcender method will not be taught to others. Moreover, although the Calamity Transcender method allows you to devour the cultivation of others, it's also very easy for your heart demons to breed. These cultivation resources are enough for you to step into the Saint King realm. This is your best choice, Yi Xian said softly. Sir must be joking. I can't learn the Calamity Transcender method. Although this method allows one to progress very quickly, with my temperament, I'm afraid that sooner or later, I will suffer from cultivation deviation and die. It's better for me to obediently follow Sir as a lackey, Fatso Huang said with a smile. I don't have many friends in my life. Although you and Bei Chun are my master and servant, you are also my brothers. Besides brother Bai Yi, the two of you are the ones I trust the most. Loneliness. With a self-deprecating smile, Yi Xian's temperament was a little lonely. As he said, he had been too lonely along the way. His relatives were buried in the yellow earth. His so-called lovers were all dead. And even some of his friends' souls had returned to heaven and earth. In this chaotic world, only Fatso Huang, Gu Beichen, and Lu Bai could make him trust. Even if it was Luo Ho and Yuan Ling, Yi Xian did not trust them that much. Sir, I will definitely cultivate well and live up to your expectations, Fatso Huang said seriously, which was rare for him. Well, you can go now. Comprehend the heaven burial method well. I also want to continue to comprehend the Tao comprehending realm. I hope I can step into this realm before the Alliance Grand Ceremony, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Yes, sir. Fatso Huang bowed and left, no longer disturbing Yi Xian's cultivation. It was also on this day that the entire snow bamboo peak was sealed by a large array and completely fell into silence. Time was like water, and the years passed by quickly. 7 years later, clang clang clang, a total of 108 bell tolls reverberated in the Mount Han for hundreds of millions of miles. Dharma carriages flew past from all directions, and many people with terrifying auras were rushing towards the Grand Yin Heavenly Sect. Today was the day of the Alliance Grand Ceremony of the Northern Region. All the major sects and orthodoxies gathered together, which was a grand event in the Beichen starfield. Of course, the so-called Alliance Grand Ceremony was just a gimmick. The real core was the distribution of benefits among the major sects and orthodoxies. As mentioned before, the Beichen starfield was bitterly cold, and cultivation resources were very scarce. For a little bit of cultivation resources, sects and families would be slaughtered. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.